Chapter 26. In the wilderness at night. Violent winds, torrential rain, lightning, thunder, and flying bullets. Cale's face was facing down as he continued to accelerate his descent. The night wind blew against his windbreaker, making it flutter loudly. This time he had chosen to come with Steve to rescue the troops for two reasons. First, he wanted to test his strength after his transformation. Second, there was a large number of battle achievements and a large number of prizes to draw. There was no reason for him not to come. Not far below, Steve opened his parachute. Cale also estimated the time to open his parachute. He opened the parachute behind him, and the two of them floated down into the wilderness. Da-da-da. They had only descended 20 meters when the enemy soldiers below seemed to have discovered their tracks. They kept firing into the sky. "I'll attract their fire," Steve shouted as if he was afraid that the bullets would hit Cale. He immediately controlled the parachute to attract the fire and rushed down first. "I still need you to block the bullets." Cale shook his head and smiled. He pulled out the Nepalese army knife from his waist with his left hand and waved it behind him. He actually cut off the parachute rope on his back. They were still more than 10 meters above the ground in the wilderness. Without the buoyancy of the parachute, Cale quickly fell again. Seeing this, not only Steve but also the German soldiers below were stunned. Is that person trying to commit suicide? The German soldiers had just thought of this when they saw Cale roll on the ground after falling from a height of more than 10 meters. He stood up again easily. "My legs are a little numb. But now I can really do something that ordinary people can't do." Cale's cold face showed a hint of a smile. He didn't test it. He just felt that he could do it, so he took the risk and gave it a try. Now, his physical fitness, which was beyond human standards, was like a treasure trove meeting a key, or a sports car meeting a highway, to the hundreds of battle skill cards. The combination of the two caused an unimaginable qualitative change. "What are you waiting for? Shoot." Several German soldiers were still staring at Cale in a daze. After their leader shouted a reminder, they hurriedly raised their guns and aimed. However, Cale's reaction was faster. Instead of retreating, he moved forward, holding the saber in his left hand as he rushed toward the muzzle of the German soldier. But Cale suddenly stepped to the left, and a pile of bullets brushed past his right shoulder and hit the mud. When the German soldiers panicked and turned their muzzles to the left, he quickly moved to the right. Moving left and right was just to avoid the bullets. The most important thing was his superb speed. A sprinter's movement speed was around 10 seconds for a 100-meter dash, but Cale only needed 3 to 4 seconds for a 100-meter dash. The distance between them, which was originally only 20 to 30 meters, was less than a breath's worth of time. Poochie. Not even giving the second wave of bullets a chance to be fired, Cale closed in on the enemy soldier, raised his hand and slashed down, the bright blade cutting through the sound of the sound. The leader's eyes were still filled with fear. The broken barrel of the rifle in his hand fell to the ground. Soon, a flat line of blood appeared on his neck, and his head rolled off his body. "Monster!" The soldier behind the leader screamed in fear and was about to run away. Cale took a step forward, reached out his right hand and grabbed the back of the soldier's neck, lifting him off the ground with one hand. "Let him go!" Another soldier shouted in panic. Another soldier shouted in a panic. He pointed his gun at Kyle, but before he could shoot, a figure suddenly jumped down from above his head and stepped on him. "You're so slow." Cale chuckled. He spun the soldier in his hand 360 degrees and slammed his face into the mud. "Cale, what's going on with your speed and strength?" Steve looked at him in shock as he stepped on the struggling German soldier. Cale's face was calm. He never thought of hiding his super soldier abilities in front of Steve. After all, as long as he wanted to display the corresponding strength, he would have to explain it to the army sooner or later. "I didn't tell you because I've only just mastered this power." Cale sighed and explained to Steve seriously, "Do you still remember my counterattack 10 days ago? In the warehouse of the large enemy base I found a reagent on the commander. I wanted to bring it back to the base for the scientists to study, but unfortunately, the reagent broke when I was escaping, and the reagent liquid flowed into my wound." Steve didn't doubt Cale at all and asked urgently, "Was the reagent liquid light blue?" Cale nodded and said, "That's right. When the reagent liquid mixed with my blood, I fainted from the pain. When I woke up in the hospital, my body seemed to have undergone an unprecedented mutation. My strength and speed were beyond that of a normal person." "Cale, congratulations. It looks like you got the super soldier's original serum and successfully mixed it with your body," Steve said happily. "Super soldier's original serum?" Cale looked like he didn't understand. "Yes. The doctor was originally from the German scientific department and later escaped from the research institute. I heard that the upper echelons of the German army also used the super soldier's original serum. I didn't think that there would be one left. You were lucky to get it? Steve sighed. He was really happy for Cale. After all, Cale was the one who gave him the opportunity to experiment with the super soldier, so he always felt guilty. Cale also knew that the origin of his ability was a bit rough, but based on Steve's 100% trust in him, it was an easy lie. Chapter 27. The German factory-like fortress was right outside the gate. Under the curtain of rain, a convoy of 6 large German-style supply trucks slowly drove through the mud. The destination of the transport was obviously the garrison fortress. 2 figures quickly swept through the forest on the side. Taking advantage of the night, they sneaked into the back of the last supply truck. Cale took the lead and entered the back of the truck that was only covered by a leather cloth. When he saw 2 fully armed German soldiers sitting inside, he whispered, "One each." He quickly rushed to one of the soldiers and covered his mouth with his right hand. At the same time, his left hand had already stabbed half of the Nepalese army knife into the soldier's heart. Seeing his comrade killed in front of him, the other soldier finally reacted to the enemy attack. Just as he was about to take out his gun, a young man behind Cale also rushed forward. The steel shield decorated with Captain America's decoration hit the soldier's forehead first. Steve followed with a sharp hand knife and shattered the neck of the unconscious soldier. Not bad, but a bit too slow. Cale, who was sitting next to them, nodded and gave a fair evaluation. "You're too fast." Steve dragged the soldier's body and said with a bitter smile, "If you want to fight side by side, you have to learn to keep up with my rhythm." Cale shrugged and threw the soldier's body out of the truck. Steve did the same. Killing and throwing away the body was always a simple and crude way to sneak in. Because the German factory here was at the back of the war zone, and there were countless supply trucks going in and out every day, the soldiers at the main gate didn't check the back of the truck one by one. The transport team did not expect that their own vehicle would bring 2 super soldiers from the enemy into the fortress. After the transport truck stopped, Cale and Steve came out of the back of the truck and hid between the bunkers. The sneak in this time was almost effortless. It was much easier than the large base they raided last time. The light rain had completely stopped. Under the dim light of the night, a large factory building was located in the fortress. Soldiers were constantly moving in boxes of supplies. Many soldiers were patrolling with blue light special guns. There were also high-end weapons such as tanks in the fortress. They were all focused on guarding the factory. It doesn't look like a base for soldiers. Instead, it looks more like a manufacturing factory. Cale muttered to himself. He looked around and saw the 20-meter-tall factory building. He could vaguely hear the sound of machinery running. They've been building factories here day and night. What exactly are they trying to make? Steve asked doubtfully. Make what? A thought flashed through Cale's mind. He glanced at Steve beside him and said seriously, "Steve, let's split up." Steve looked at Cale in surprise. Split up? Shouldn't it be safer to move together? What's the point of being safe? The important thing is to quickly find where the hostages are being held. If we are discovered by the enemy with our strength, we can safely escape, but the hostage might not. Cale explained, "The factory is so big. Let's split up and look for them. The first thing we do when we find them is to rescue the hostages." That makes sense. Then you be careful. Steve nodded in agreement. He impatiently avoided the soldiers and went to build the factory. Looking at Steve's back, Kyle had a smug smile on his face. "Sorry, brother. You'll attract the attention of the enemy in the factory first. This is also a training for you. After all, there's no better way to learn than to fight in real life." A manufacturing factory. At this time, is there any better energy source for the Germans than gemstone? Cale licked his lips. The outline of his body gradually faded in the darkness. Soon he completely disappeared. Stealth activated. Nightwalker mode. Up close, Cale was like a shadow that didn't exist in the world. He silently followed Steve. In the factory building of the fortress, the internal machinery and equipment were more advanced than the outside. The German workers were constantly operating the equipment. Steve moved forward stealthily. He was unusually cautious. Without Cale's guidance, he was much more relaxed. Squeak. After crushing the head of a patrolling soldier with the door, Steve completely entered the factory. A cloud of fog maintained a distance of 10 meters behind him. Not bad. It's just that shield that's a bit of an eyesore. Cale couldn't help but complain. It was fine that Steve sneaked in, but he had to carry a steel shield with American stripes and stars painted on the surface of the shield. It was as if he was afraid that people wouldn't know that he was an American soldier. As the vanguard, Captain America is really destined to be a shield soldier. Cale shook his head and continued to follow. Steve walked up to the third floor of the factory. Below the suspended railway were metal pipes and equipment. On the aisle of the third floor were rows of material shelves that glowed with blue light. Energy clips? He picked up a clip with blue light from a box in surprise. He didn't have time to think too much and continued to look for the hostages. As soon as Steve left, the stealthy Cale stopped next to the material shelves. Looking at the rows of blue light clips in front of him, he couldn't help but get excited. How much gemstone energy was there? How many times could he draw cards? Cale was secretly happy. But just as he focused on the materials, the excitement on his face disappeared instantly. New energy clip. A new energy clip made from gemstone energy. It can shoot destructive laser rays. Rare green item card. Do you want to draw? Draw my ass. Cale was speechless. He thought that these energy clips were all blue quality. He didn't expect that they were only rare green quality. Rare green item cards provided for sacrifice as materials were also counted as green cards. This was also the reason why Cale was not interested. The energy clips in front of him could only be used in actual combat. Instead of sacrificing materials, he might as well exchange them for normal green materials on the battlefield. Forget it. I'll just go with Steve to save the hostages. Cale was a bit helpless. But just as he got up and took a step, he seemed to remember something and stopped. Wait a minute. What were the main materials for such a huge new energy production factory? Right. I'm only thinking about these rubbish materials. This place has one of the most precious items on Earth or even in the universe. Cale's heart skipped a beat as he clenched his fists in excitement. The Tesseract. This place had the Tesseract as a space gem carrier. Thought. Chapter 28. At this time in the fortress factory. Warning. Warning. The prisoners locked in the underground of the factory have escaped. All soldiers, please go and suppress them immediately. The red warning lights on the walls lit up, and the radio broadcast a sharp and urgent report back and forth. The guards inside and outside the factory reacted quickly. Looks like Steve has already released the prisoners. Cale was still moving stealthily in the corridor of the factory. After hearing the warning broadcast, he immediately knew that Steve had been successfully rescued. It was faster than expected. He couldn't care less. Cale saw a group of German soldiers appear in the corridor in front of him. He immediately exited his stealthy state and ran as fast as he could. He held the military knife in his left hand and clenched his right hand into a fist. His speed soared as he rushed forward. Enemy attack. The German soldier in front of the group shouted in panic. He pulled the trigger of his gun forward, and suddenly, a glaring blue and white laser burst out from the muzzle. The corridor was originally a straight and narrow path, so it was easy to hit the target without aiming. In addition, the speed of the laser was several times faster than the speed of a bullet. Even a super soldier wouldn't be able to dodge it. Cale's pupils contracted. The laser beam kept expanding in his field of vision, and the hairs on his body stood on end. He didn't try to dodge or defend. Instead, he increased his speed and rushed forward. The moment the laser beam was about to hit his chest, he quickly waved his right hand in front of him. Chi. The energy laser beam that could directly evaporate a human body was forcefully reflected by Cale's right arm. The German soldier in front of the group didn't have time to react. The laser beam from his gun had already been reflected back to his body. In the blink of an eye, his entire body, along with his helmet and combat suit, had evaporated into water vapor. He just reflected the laser beam back. Is this a monster? The German soldier had a horrified expression as if he had seen a ghost. The new energy weapon was a high-risk hot weapon that could kill on impact. This was the first time he had seen it ineffective and reflected by someone's hand. Those who block my way die. Cale didn't care whether the enemy had lost their will to fight or not. To him, whether the enemy would continue to counterattack, flee, or remain motionless like they were now, none of them had any practical effect. Like a cheetah diving into a group of rabbits, Cale rushed into the enemy's ranks and began to harvest lives. The small Nepalese army knife was like the scythe of the goddess of death. Every stab took the life of a soldier. With strength that far exceeded that of a normal person, coupled with the sharp military knife, the enemy's combat suit and human body were as fragile as paper. Scarlet blood splattered and dyed the corridor red. Get out of my way. Cale muttered coldly as he sent the last soldier flying with an elbow strike. Due to the laser beam just now, the bandages and sleeves on his right hand had completely evaporated, revealing the vibranium bracer with a cold metallic texture. Vibranium, also known as sound-absorbing steel. Not only was it one of the hardest materials in the Marvel Universe, but it could also absorb heat, energy, and kinetic energy. Relying on the vibranium arm guard, the laser had lost its offensive power when it landed on Cale's right hand. Furthermore, it had bounced back due to the swing of the arm. After dealing with a group of German soldiers, Cale did not waste any time and sprinted toward the factory's central control room. He did not notice that the scene of him killing the enemy team was clearly transmitted to the other side of the equipment from the camera in the corner of the wall. At this time, in the factory's central control room, the middle-aged Red Skull, who looked like a middle-aged officer, looked at the dozen or so surveillance screens in front of him. His fake face showed a hint of fear. 2 super soldiers invaded the factory? The reason he said this was because on one of the surveillance screens in the underground area of the factory, Steve, who was wearing a blue and white striped bodysuit, was quickly taking down 2 soldiers. On the other screen, it just happened to show Cale rushing into the German army, leaving behind 7 tragic corpses as he continued to approach this side. The first one was fine, but the second one, why is he so strong? Red Skull found it hard to believe. He knew that he could not be like Cale and treat the German army armed with new energy weapons as if they were just for show. The super physique that was used to the extreme, the excellent close combat skills, and the decisive killing. This was simply a war machine. They were all super soldiers, but why was there such a huge difference in strength? Although the super soldier he injected was only the initial unfinished sample and had the terrible drawback of being disfigured into a Red Skull face, the difference in strength should not be so great. Red Skull did not think too much about it. He calmed down and turned on all the self-destruct switches in the factory. The old doctor behind him was shocked and asked, "What are you doing?" Red Skull pointed indifferently to a surveillance screen, in which he could see Cale quickly passing by. "I can't stop him. Not to mention the soldiers here, even I may not be able to stop him. Retreat immediately," Red Skull said and quickly walked to the wall of the central control room. After opening the secret compartment, a square Rubik's Cube object with blue light appeared. The Rubik's Cube. Not to mention this factory, even 10 factories could not compare to 1 in 10,000 of the object in front of him. It should be in front. Chapter 29. The dazzling blue energy tide, wherever it spread, whether it was the walls, the ground, or the steel door, they were all annihilated into nothingness. Ah! The screams of the old doctor with glasses were insignificant among them, and his body turned into nothingness little by little until it evaporated. The wall of the corridor shattered and fell, and the dust continued to form a shock wave that shook Cale away. A few seconds later, everything began to calm down. At the end of the corridor, Red Skull tore off the mask on his face, revealing a scarlet skull face. He looked indifferently at the damaged corridor in front of him that had suffered a devastating blow, and coldly dropped a sentence, "See you later, super soldier," and then turned and left without looking back. After a while, in the pile of rubble in the corridor, a sorry figure stood up. It was Cale, who had escaped the disaster. Cough. Cale patted the dust off his body and looked at the torn human skin mask on the ground at the end of the corridor, and his tone was extremely cold. "Red Skull, next time. I promise that next time, let me meet you again, you will die a horrible death. This hatred will be remembered in a small notebook first." Fortunately, there was a meat shield in front of him to block most of the energy wave, and with the block of the vibranium arm guard, Cale's sleeves were burned and his clothes were damaged. However, I still lost the best opportunity to seize the magic cube. Cale sighed. This time he really suffered a loss, and he underestimated the villain Red Skull. After all, he is the founder of the Hydra organization. Even if his strength is slightly inferior to Steve, his insidious means are still impossible to guard against. At this time, there was a sudden alarm in the hub control room, which only half of the space was intact. Kyle came back to his senses and rushed in as if he had sensed something. He saw the console of the hub control room emitting black smoke, and the main screen prompted in German in red letters "Factory Self-Destruction Countdown. 61 seconds, and the seconds were still decreasing. Directly opposite the control room screen, an unconscious young man was tied to the experiment table with a naked upper body, and there was a large map on the side wall with 6 flags scattered on the map. Cale's attention was keenly focused on the map, and suddenly a card draw message came into his mind. German Factories Distribution Map. It recorded the distribution of 6 German weapons factories and bases. White item card. Do you want to draw? Another map. This is the unlocking stage, right? Cale blinked his eyes, and his lips curled into a cold smile. Red Skull, I'll let you escape as you wish. I'll destroy your nest one by one first. Kale had just drawn the distribution map from the wall into a card when a tall figure suddenly rushed into the room. The two of them looked at each other and were slightly stunned. Kale? Steve. After going around in a big circle, Kale and Steve met up in the factory's control room. What happened here? Steve was bewildered as he looked around the damaged control room. It's very simple. The factory's commander was anxious and threw an energy bomb to stop me. Kale shrugged and gestured with his chin to the young man lying in the room. That's the person you want to save this time. It's Baki. Steve was overjoyed when he saw the young man and hurried over to wake him up. Just carry him with your shoulder. This place is about to explode. Kale said and pointed to the main screen. There was only half a minute left on the countdown. Steve nodded and did as he was told. He carried his comatose friend on his shoulder. Kyle was about to lead the way and escape when he suddenly saw something on the console table. Car key. The key to Red Skull's exclusive car. The car was built with top German craftsmanship and has amazing horsepower. White item card. Got it, follow me. Kale grabbed the car key and rushed to the factory's garage with Steve. The half-minute countdown ended. Explosions occurred all over the factory at the same time, and the new energy materials triggered a series of explosions. The fire lit up the wilderness at night. Outside the factory, a large number of UA military prisoners were liberated. After looting the factory's new energy weapons and tanks, the German troops stationed here were defeated. Seeing the factory self-destruct, all the UA soldiers rushed out. Just then, with the roar of an engine, a fashionable and exquisite luxury car that looked like a work of art suddenly rushed out of the explosion. Listen to my orders, break out in the direction of our base. Kerr, who was in the driver's seat, shouted. He stepped on the accelerator and led the charge, smashing through the factory's iron fence. It was as if he was driving Red Skull's precious car as a tank. Follow. Follow. When the U.S. soldiers saw Steve and Bucky in the car, who were dressed conspicuously, they knew that they were on the same side. They immediately cheered and followed the car into the wilderness in the dark night. One night passed. In the morning, when the sky was just bright, Carter couldn't hold back and went to the communication center of the training base to inquire about the news. Lieutenant Kale and Steve Rogers disappeared in the third area after the war last night. The factory has lost all signs of life. The search team has returned and is now ready to officially register them as dead. Commander Brandt personally received the telegram and said coldly to Carter, "Because of you, we not only lost an excellent officer, a propaganda leader, but also the lives of hundreds of soldiers. If this is the result, I am willing to take all the responsibility." Carter responded calmly. She didn't believe that the two men died so easily on the battlefield. "It doesn't matter what you say now." Brandt suddenly paused halfway through his sentence and turned his gaze to the side behind him. Chapter 30. It was the sound of a car between Kale and Steve to rescue from the wilderness ended in a complete victory. Look, what's that? On the same day, oh my God, Kale handed over the soldiers in the base who were preparing for training were all surprised. He didn't even personally confirm the military base and quickly moved after washing up and changing into a formal heavily damaged luxury car was leading the way. Up with Howard. Kale sat in the driver's seat and drove slowly before Steve and Baki sat shoulder to shoulder in the back seat. Behind the luxurious car were hundreds of U.S. soldiers armed with new energy weapons. Howard was a rich local tyrant. Although they had fought all night, they couldn't be polite with him. Full of fatigue. Therefore, every step Kale's strong suggestion, resolute. They took Stark's plane to the nearest city to attend a banquet and dinner. When Commander Brandt saw the enemy tanks behind the team, also very gentlemanly, speechless. The place he invited them to was naturally not an ordinary restaurant. Please give me a chance to show my talent. The entrance of the hotel was luxuriously dazzling. The young man's firm words still echoed in his ears. A clean red carpet covered the ground. He didn't know when, but the recruit who just entered the base had quickly become a hero who repeatedly created miracles. Were all beautiful women in short skirts. Officer Brandt continued his unfinished words and took the lead in applauding. Kale commented. The soldiers in the training base also followed suit and the three into the hotel. Howard was obviously a regular here. The customer service receptionist didn't even confirm his identity. When they saw him coming, they flirted with him and offered all kinds of VIP services. The dining hall on the first floor was much more low-key and luxurious than the outside. Under the warm classical lights, musicians played violins and guests ate elegantly under the music. Most of the people here were either rich or respectable. They didn't have the slightest worry about the war in the outside world. However, when Howard was about to ask the front desk customer service to find a 4-person table, Kale spoke first and asked the customer service staff to find 2 2-person tables. When Howard heard this, he immediately smiled. 2-person table? Lieutenant Kale, you know what I mean. Let me and the beauty Carter have dinner together tonight. You think too much. Cale rolled his eyes and looked at Carter next to Steve. Tonight, she was finally no longer dressed in a female military dress. Carter wore a strapless long dress to match the occasion. With a little makeup on her already beautiful face, she looked even more beautiful. Her red dress was just right, outlining her mature figure that had been concealed in the past. I promised you to bring Steve back safely. I didn't break my promise, Cale said to Carter. Without waiting for her response, he patted Steve's shoulder. You take Carter to dinner first. Steve first exclaimed in surprise and then hurriedly nodded. Oh, I understand. I'm creating an opportunity for you. Kyle chuckled to himself. He didn't have any thoughts about Carter, so there was no such thing as pity. More importantly, the purpose of tonight was not as simple as eating a sumptuous dinner. The two of you please follow me. The customer service receptionist bowed warmly and gestured to the dining area with her hand. She led Steve and Carter to their seats first. Carter left just like that? Howard's face was full of disappointment. He glanced at Cale and said hesitantly, Are we two men going to dinner? Or a double meal? It's up to you whether you want to eat or not. To be honest, I have something else to discuss with you tonight. Cale shrugged. Something else? Howard looked at Cale in confusion. Kyle said meaningfully, As for the specifics, let's find a place to sit down first. On the basement floor of the hotel building. The style here was different from the main hall on the first floor. Under the dim light, all kinds of gentlemen and women were letting go of themselves and dancing to the music. The receptionist holding the wine glasses was wearing even more revealing clothes. She wore a bunny-made outfit with thin fabric. Her white tube top and long legs were very attractive. Howard brought Cale to sit at the bar. On the way, he openly pinched the buttocks of a few bunny girls passing by. He was romantic and gentlemanly. Sure enough, the Stark family was full of playboys. Cale secretly complained and ordered a glass of vodka from the bartender. Howard ordered a cocktail. Then, let's have a toast to World War II. Howard elegantly raised his glass and said something unexpected. Cale looked at him in surprise and asked, Is there something to be happy about when there's a war? Of course. For someone like me who studies scientific strategies, destructive weapons, and super technology, it's hard for me to even do my job without a war. Howard maintained his smile and looked at Cale. Aren't you the same? If there wasn't a war, you wouldn't have been able to rise from a recruit to a lieutenant in just a few weeks. I have to say your view of benefits is quite strong. Cale couldn't help but laugh. He raised his glass and clinked it with Howard's. War had its advantages and disadvantages. For those who had the ability, it was an unprecedented opportunity. For those who didn't, it was an abhorrent disaster. Howard drank a mouthful of wine and said, Don't keep me in suspense. If there's something you want to discuss with me, just say it. Otherwise, I'll have to hit on a beauty. Cale nodded and went straight to the point. I'll be frank. I want shares of Stark Industries. You want to become a partner in my industry? Howard was a bit surprised. His fingers tapped on the table. Can you tell me the reason? Cale drank and said, It's very simple. I believe in Stark Industries' potential. In the future, it will definitely be the top strategic and scientific manufacturer on this planet. The most important thing is that I believe in you. You're a 100% top genius. I have to say you have a good eye. Howard was satisfied with the answer. He was a top genius and had enough capital to be proud. Because it's a time of war, my current work is still focused on the country's scientific and technological strategic research. Although the Stark Industries I founded hasn't made much progress yet, it has already achieved results in the anti-gravity project. In the future, it will involve more scientific fields. If the war ends, Stark Industries will develop rapidly. Howard looked at Cale seriously and said, It's not that I'm looking down on you. I've seen your file. You don't have a lot of assets under your name. Even a colonel's salary can't be that high. May I ask how you want to invest in Stark Industries? Even if they were friends, Stark Industries shares couldn't be given away for free. Cale naturally understood this point. He dared to talk about shares with a proud genius like Howard. Of course, he had enough trump cards. I'm not investing in money, but in the future. As he spoke, he took out a rectangular, thin machine from his pocket and placed it on the bar. The front of the machine was a tempered glass screen with a small camera on it. The back of the machine was a smooth metal shell with a prominent Apple logo in the middle. Chapter 31. What kind of machine is this? It looks like the manufacturing process is excellent. After all, he was the most outstanding manufacturing expert among scientists. Howard looked at the exquisite metal casing of the iPhone and felt that this item was not simple. He picked up the phone and waited, then began to fiddle with it from left to right. I call it a mobile phone. Kale smiled faintly and began to explain like a salesman, don't be fooled by its small size. It is actually an instrument with hundreds of functions. It has fingerprint unlock, face unlock, simple voice control, photo and video recording, storage decompression, message transmission, time alarm, calculation recording, game music, call service, search engine, and so on. This small machine has such advanced practical functions? Howard was shocked and quickly checked it carefully. Kale laughed secretly. He almost couldn't help but laugh out loud when he saw the smartest and top manufacturing genius on earth praising a mobile phone. This mobile phone was only a green quality item card. It was one of the common goods that he had drawn from the previous sacrificial draw card. Kale originally thought that it was World War II, and even telephone signal towers and the internet had not been widely established, so it was useless to draw a mobile phone. It wasn't until the last time he met Howard on the plane that an idea suddenly came to Kale's mind. The mobile phone was indeed useless to him now, but it was completely different for the genius scientific manufacturer Howard. No matter what, this mobile phone had indeed reached the point of being rotten on the streets in the 21st century, but in the current 1943, it was an advanced technological product that spanned more than half a century. Howard operated the mobile phone and looked at the lit screen. His eyes became brighter and his fingers quickly performed various commands. This surprised Kale, who was next to him. He didn't even explain the basic operation of the mobile phone to Howard, but Howard quickly began to master the operation of the mobile phone for the first time with his keen sense of technological products. He was worthy of being the father of the man who could create artificial intelligence and Iron Man suits in the future. He had the passive card of technology adaptation. Kale allowed Howard to try the mobile phone. Most of the software on the mobile phone had been deleted long ago, and the time record had been changed. However, even if Howard discovered any secrets from it, he didn't care. This trial lasted for a full 10 minutes. After Kale finished the fourth glass of wine, Howard turned off his phone. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully and then looked at Kale seriously. A color screen with high resolution, precise touch control, and various soft and practical functions that can't be achieved now. This machine called a mobile phone came from a planet whose technological level far exceeded ours. Or perhaps the future world. Forgive me for not being able to tell you too much about its origins, but I can guarantee a few things. In the face of Howard's doubts, Kyle smiled and held up 3 fingers as he said, first, its origin is absolutely safe. Secondly, there was no second mobile phone in this world. Third, it will only bring you advantages and no disadvantages. As long as we thoroughly understand the advanced technology of this machine, Stark Industries will have enough capital to enter the top technology manufacturing industry before the end of World War II. I understand. Howard fell into deep thought again. Kale wasn't in a hurry. He looked at the gentlemen and ladies dancing to their heart's content and continued to taste the wine with the unique flavor of the old era. Sir, may I have the honor of dancing with you? During this time, many young ladies and ladies took the initiative to strike up a conversation with Kale. After all, he looked young and handsome, and his perfect and robust body paired with a formal shirt was very charming. Sorry, I have something to do with my friend. Kale's gentle and gentlemanly rejection made many young ladies disappointed, but some still mustered up the courage to leave their contact cards. After a long time, Howard asked tentatively, how many shares of Stark Industries do you want to invest in this mobile phone? With such a sentence, it meant that they could continue the discussion. Kale also secretly let out a sigh of relief. Obviously, he wasn't as calm as he looked on the surface. Although he still had a lot of confidence in the mobile phone, this was the Marvel world after all. Now there were new energy weapons, anti-gravity devices, laser tanks, and self-driving fighter jets. There were countless black technologies, and Howard wasn't sure if it could move him. I want 40%, Kale said. 40%? Howard was just about to drink the first glass of wine when he suddenly choked. He coughed and said, You're asking for a sky-high price. Since it's a cooperation, of course I'll invest in more than one mobile phone. Kale's face was calm as he threw out the second hidden card in his hand. The mobile phone I brought today is just a bargaining chip for the first cooperation. I have something that's not worse than this. Can you roughly explain the function of that item? Howard was interested again. Kale had given him enough surprises tonight. I can only say that it's an introduction to the field of artificial intelligence. As soon as Kale finished speaking, Howard's whole body shook. He couldn't hold the glass steadily and put it on the bar, spilling the wine all over the table. Now, even computers were still being developed and the system was only in its embryonic form. What did artificial intelligence represent? It represented the future. If what you said is true, then you're really investing in the future. Howard was so excited that his whole body trembled. Cale smiled and asked, I don't know if 40% of Stark Industries shares is a high price under this premise? It's not high. It's definitely not high. Even if you want 50%, I'll give it to you. Howard's previous hesitation no longer existed. He had no reason to refuse. Money, fame, power, and beautiful women, Howard liked all of them. But if they were put together with inventions, they weren't worth mentioning at all. I only want 40%. It's better for you to be the founder and the first shareholder, Cale said with a smile. Stark Industries could only develop into a top industry if it was completely under Howard's control. His investment was a small capital and a huge profit. It was like raising a chicken that could continuously lay golden eggs. He didn't need to worry about money in the future. Then it's settled. You invest in the mobile phone and another item in exchange for 40% of Stark Industries shares. Howard laughed and happily raised his glass to the bartender at the front desk. He raised the glass high and said, Happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Cale raised his own glass in response. The two clinked their glasses together again. Then they both raised their heads and drank. Chapter 32. Cale estimated that Carter and the others were about to finish their dinner, so he left the ballroom bar on the basement with Howard. Cale, after such a big deal tonight, you should treat us. Howard teased Cale. After this short discussion, the two could be considered to have established a partnership and were much closer to each other. Sure. Cale smiled and blinked, but you also know that I'm still very poor right now and I haven't paid the officer's salary yet. I don't know if the big boss can give me next month's bonus from Stark Industries in advance. You're really? Howard shook his head speechlessly. He felt like he had dug a hole for himself and ended up burying himself in it. However, he still took out an exquisite gold card and a check with a receipt from his wallet and handed it over. This card is the permanent VIP card of the charming hotel here. There's also a deposit of $20,000 inside. You can use it first. Also, here's a check for $100,000. You can withdraw cash from the central banks in major cities, but it's best to make an appointment first. Otherwise, they won't be able to take out so much money. The average salary of an ordinary UA soldier was only $60 a month. The $120,000 he casually threw out was a veritable huge sum. Cale didn't hesitate to take it and teased, I didn't expect a month's bonus to be so high. Thank you, boss. Howard urged, no need to thank me. Just send the second investment item to me as soon as possible. I'll ask the lawyer to prepare the transfer agreement for you. After you sign it, you'll be a partner of Stark Industries. No problem. Cale nodded. The second item could also be carried on his body as a card, but it was inconvenient to take it out in front of others. What's the second item to invest in? In fact, it was the system program chip of the supercomputer. It was the green item card that Cale had drawn that was even more useless than a phone. It was a scattered part of a unit. However, if one wanted to step into the field of artificial intelligence, it was definitely the best stepping stone. Cale and Howard had just returned to the lobby on the first floor of the hotel when they saw Carter walking towards them in a hurry. Finished dinner? Where's Steve? Cale asked in surprise. Unexpectedly, Carter glared at him and asked, Where did you two go? I asked Steve to look for you, but he couldn't find you. This. Before Cale could answer, Howard laughed and said, Don't ask. Men naturally have their own places for entertainment. Your answer can easily make people think the wrong way. Cale cursed inwardly, but Carter didn't think too much of it. She said seriously, General Chester just sent me an order to pass it on to you guys. Let's head back to the training base first. We haven't even had a chance to relax and now we have to go back to work. Howard helplessly slapped his head. It's about the intelligence map, right? Cale showed a thoughtful expression. He had already thought that after reporting the intelligence map, there would definitely be orders from above, but he didn't think that it would be decided so quickly. Cale? Steve's voice came from behind. He just happened to return at this time. Everyone's here. Let's pay the bill and leave. Cale smiled and casually handed the VIP card in his pocket to the hotel staff. This will pay for the four of us tonight. With money on him, he felt a lot more confident. Cale, I didn't think you were so rich. Steve was surprised. He didn't need to look to know that the cost of this hotel wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Carter was even more surprised. She had also seen Cale's personal information. Then where did this hotel VIP card come from? What did these two people do just now? Carter looked at Cale and Howard suspiciously. She couldn't think of a reason. That day they flew out to eat in a big city and returned to the training base on the same day. On the plane, Carter seriously explained General Chester's orders to the three of them. Cale and Steve, you two will be the leaders. Choose soldiers from the training base to form an armed team. One by one you will attack the 6 German factories in the war zone. As long as the factories that provide weapons and supplies fall, Germany will no longer be a threat to Europe. Steve, from now on you will be a corporal. Carter's gaze fell on Cale. As for you, you will continue to accumulate military merits. This time you won't be promoted. It doesn't matter. Cale nodded. He hadn't even warmed up his lieutenant's certificate yet. He was used to accumulating military merits and then being promoted. He liked the rhythm of jumping ranks. Carter continued seriously, Stark, you will provide scientific strategic equipment for 2 super soldiers. Oh. Howard was piloting the plane and responded casually. Soon he seemed to realize something and turned his head in shock. 2 super soldiers. That's right. Cale also became a super soldier, Steve replied. This information was specially reported when he returned after the war. Carter stared straight at Cale and said seriously, Next, you will be in charge of monitoring and recording under my supervision and collecting information about the super soldiers. Okay. Cale replied weakly and muttered in a low voice, I am at least a lieutenant. How can I lose face if I am supervised by a woman like you? Why don't you just have Steve as your guinea pig? Carter pretended not to hear and maintained her cool and elegant demeanor. Steve immediately suggested, if you need people to form an armed team, just gather the soldiers who were rescued last night. They have been fighting on the front lines for a long time and have experience in using new energy weapons against the Germans. No problem. As captives, they must have a lot of pent-up energy that they haven't completely vented last night. But on top of that, I will also need to transfer someone from the 102nd Regiment, Cale said after some thought. Oh, Carter asked. She still had the authority to transfer just one person from the front lines. His name is Nick Fry. He is a very intelligent and capable staff sergeant, Cale said with a smile. This was a chance to quickly accumulate military merits. He was also taking good care of Fry. Achoo. In a temporary tent on the front lines, a one-eyed black officer sneezed. He touched his bald head in surprise, a little confused. The weather isn't cold. Why do I have a bad feeling? Chapter 33. A day passed. Steve gathered the soldiers he rescued and quickly formed a sizable army. This was also thanks to his personal charm, his sense of justice, and his natural ability to be a leader. At noon, a helicopter landed in the training base. Fry walked down from the helicopter with a military bag on his back. He looked around in confusion, not knowing why he was transferred here from the front line alone. The frontline commander only informed him that there was an important dispatch order, then he hurriedly packed his bag and boarded the helicopter. Fry, long time no see. A familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Fry turned around and when he saw who it was, his jaw dropped. Cale? Call me sir. Cale purposely put on a straight face and pointed at the military rank on his chest. Yes, Lieutenant Cale. You didn't transfer me here this time, did you? Fry said unhappily. He already knew that Cale was promoted to lieutenant when he was at the front line, so he wasn't too surprised. What do you think? Other than me, who would purposely use the military's authority to transfer you? Cale shrugged. Tell me, why did you transfer me here? Don't tell me it's to cooperate with you on the battlefield? Frey's voice was trembling. Although he was promoted to sergeant after cooperating with Cale last time, it was still too crazy when he thought back to the battle. Cale was not the kind of person who would follow the conventional path step by step. If he could fight head-on, he would not back down. If he couldn't fight head-on, he would continue to fight head-on. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a war maniac. It's not to go to the front line. Cale comforted him. Fry was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Cale's next sentence almost made him faint. It's to enter the enemy's rear and attack the German factory bases. A total of 6 of them. You're dragging me down. Fry was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. I'm purposely taking care of you so that you can display your leadership skills in advance. Cale revealed a devilish smile. As the future director of SHELD, there was no reason for such a talent to be wasted in a stalemate at the front line. In the basement of the base, the walls of the passageway were lit with dim yellow lights, which were divided into many research departments and basements. Many correspondents, researchers, and officers were here to analyze the situation in the front line. Cale led Fry all the way inside. As soon as he stepped into the entrance of the Science and Strategy Department, someone in the room seemed to have noticed them. A blue figure quickly walked over to greet them. Cale, you came just in time. What do you think of my new combat uniform? It was Steve. He stopped in front of the door and asked for Cale's opinion. Well, Cale's gaze fell on Steve's body. The angle of force can be controlled to make it return to the origin after being thrown. A rare blue item card. This shield is made of materials that were accidentally synthesized. Due to the process of synthesizing the materials and the proportion of the various components are unknown, it is no longer possible to recreate this metal. It can be said to be a unique piece of equipment in the world. After Howard finished the introduction, he looked at Cale and Steve. There was only one shield, but who should he give it to? Both of them were super soldiers. If it was before, he would give it to Steve, who had become a super soldier first. But now, whether it was for public or private reasons, Cale was clearly the best candidate to use this shield. Cale? Before Howard could finish, Cale took the shield. He tapped the hard surface of the shield with his finger and said with emotion, "This is really a very good piece of equipment. Steve, you can use it." Cale casually stuffed the shield into Steve's arms, which surprised everyone present. "Cale, this." Steve hugged the shield with both hands and was at a loss as to what to do. He wanted to open his mouth in refuse. "Okay." Cale patted Steve's shoulder heavily and interrupted him. "You and I don't have to separate. Take this shield and don't drag me down on the battlefield in the future." "Yes, I know." Steve was not pretentious. He was touched and held the shield in his hands tightly. His eyes were full of determination. "Very good, just like that." Cale smiled slightly. He had vibranium arm guards as defensive equipment. Although the shield was good, it was not suitable for his battle philosophy of attack is defense. Moreover, without a shield, how could Steve fight evenly with the enemy? Chapter 34. Well, since Cale said so, then this shield will be used by Steve. Howard thought for a moment and said, "Actually, there is another piece of equipment. Although it is not as comprehensive as this shield, its lethality is many times higher." "Don't keep me in suspense. What other equipment do you have?" Cale urged. "Wait a moment," Howard said as he opened another airmail box and took out an item that looked like a long sword. The hilt was just enough to be grasped by hand, and the rest was covered by the leather scabbard. "This is Dash." Cale's eyes locked on the item, and a blue card information quickly appeared. Sodium carbon steel sword. A high craftsmanship long sword made of carbona alloy. Blue item card. Carbona is a type of radioactive metal. Although its hardness is lower than adamantium, it has very good ductility, so the blade is very thin. The long sword is tough and sharp, and can inhibit the healing factor of the human body, causing permanent damage. There was no rare prefix, but the blue grade proved that the equipment was not ordinary. A long sword made of sodium carbon steel. Cale reached out and took the long sword. Holding the cold hilt, he pulled the sword out of the leather scabbard. Suddenly, a cold light shone in the basement. This was a one-handed sword. The guard was elongated to form a cross with the blade. The blade was forged to the extreme, and no one dared to question whether it could cut through iron like mud. Howard explained, "This sword is made of carbona alloy. I got it from the Russians, and it is only enough to make this small one-handed sword. I designed it according to the style of the Middle Ages. I hope you like it." "I like it very much." Cale nodded, and his face was filled with unconcealable satisfaction. With the vibranium bracers as defensive equipment, what he needed most now was an offensive weapon. In the fierce battle with the German army, the Nepalese army knife was gradually unable to keep up with the intensity of the battle. And this sodium carbon steel sword was just enough to replace the army knife that was worn out in many places. "That's fine. One of you will hold a shield and the other will hold a sword. As the leader of the team and the top combat power, we will have more confidence in destroying the German factory base." Howard thought of something and said to Cale, "Tell me your request for the combat suit later and I'll be able to make it tonight. This way both of you will be fully equipped." Cale nodded. In fact, it was just a modification based on Captain America's combat suit. If the basic color, pattern and hood configuration of the suit were removed, he could reluctantly accept it. Steve said, "We've also gathered most of our teams and we've controlled them to around 500 people. We'll use the German new energy weapons as the main weapon, supplemented by conventional weapons. We'll be able to arm ourselves into an elite offensive force. It seems that as long as we wait for the intelligence personnel in the base to finish their analysis and implement the orders from above, We can start the operation tomorrow. The corners of Kale's mouth curled up slightly and his eyes were cold. Red Skull, let's see how long you're going to hide. Fry saw Kale's cold face and subconsciously shrank back half a step. For the first time he felt pity for the German army. After all, they were targeted by a killing god. Another day passed. This morning, the colonel in the training base finally received the official attack order after an hour-long discussion with the general. The highest person in charge was Lieutenant Kale and Captain Steve. The two would lead a 500-person force into the enemy's theater of operations, cross 30 miles, and attack the first factory base as the target. The attack order was White Star Plan. In the afternoon, in the basement of the base, Carter quickly walked through the passage, looked around, and finally ran directly in the direction of the research room. As soon as she opened the door of the research room, there was a powerful explosion with a faint blue light inside. Two people in scientific research suits were hit by the shockwave and fell to the ground. Stark, are you okay? Carter called out and looked at Howard and his assistant sitting on the ground in surprise. It's nothing, I just studied the German army's new energy source. Howard got up from the ground and asked in confusion, what are you doing here? Aren't Kale and Steve about to leave? I was just about to ask you. Carter looked at the empty research room and frowned. I thought the two of them were preparing here. Howard shook his head and said, no. I haven't seen the two of them since Kale came over and took away the combat suit last night. Maybe they're organizing the team in the square. These two people are really worrisome. Carter stomped her feet and quickly rushed to the square of the base. When Carter arrived at the main square of the training base, he found that the place was already crowded with soldiers. They were all so excited that they stood on their tiptoes and wanted to squeeze in to get a better view. Just then, a cold voice came from the innermost part of the crowd of soldiers. Listen to my order, all of you sit down. Swoosh. Thousands of American soldiers immediately sat down quietly, and the lively scene in the square instantly quieted down. Only Carter, who had just arrived, was still standing at the outermost part of the crowd. He looked in the direction of her gaze. 500 armed forces who were ready to leave surrounded the central area, while the rest of the soldiers from the training base surrounded the outer circle. In the circular area with a radius of 5 meters, two tall and strong young men stood facing each other. One of them was wearing a blue and white combat suit with a silver star symbol of American justice on the chest. He wore a dark blue mask that covered his face and carried a colorful metal round shield on his back. The other one was wearing the same black and gold combat uniform. The emblem on his chest was a rotating cross that symbolized death. As he wasn't wearing a hood, his handsome face was exposed. On his back was a one-handed sword with a leather sheath. Steve, Kale, what are you doing? Carter looked at the two people surrounded by many soldiers in the square, still confused. In the central area, Kale stared at Steve and said coldly, Steve, are we really going to fight? It's almost time for the planned departure. Yes. Just treat it as a warm-up exercise. Steve said firmly, clenching his hands into fists and getting ready for close combat. I won't go easy on you. Kale narrowed his eyes. Although he didn't know why Steve suddenly proposed to fight before departure, he had no reason to back down. Steve said stubbornly, please use all your strength. Very well. Kale smiled faintly and didn't use the weapon on his back. Instead, he clenched his fists and got into a similar close combat posture. I heard that you were evenly matched with everyone. Chapter 35. Thousands of American soldiers were sitting in the center of the square, watching the fight. Kale and Steve were still facing each other in silence a moment ago. The next moment, both of them rushed toward each other. From the perspective of a third party, they were already engaged in close combat in the blink of an eye. Be careful. Steve seemed to realize that he couldn't let Kale get the upper hand, so he took the initiative to put pressure on Qin Xiaobei. As soon as he got close to the attack range, his left hand, which had been gathering power, hit Kale's face like a whip. Bro, don't hit people in the face. Kale held back his sarcasm and reacted quickly. He raised his right arm, which wasn't wearing the vibranium bracer, and blocked the attack. Bang! Seeing that his attack didn't work, Steve bent his left leg back and raised his knee. He didn't want to give Qin Xiaobei any chance to recover. He wanted to use high-intensity attacks to crush his opponent. Kale raised his left leg as if he had seen this coming. He kicked the side of Steve's leg and stopped the knee that was about to hit his stomach. Huh. Steve frowned. He didn't expect to be at a disadvantage so quickly because of the difference in experience. He gritted his teeth and advanced instead of retreating. He continued to attack with his fists and legs, fighting Kyle in close combat. Bang bang bang. Both of them were just fighting with their fists and feet, but there were powerful explosions in the air. Should I say that they are indeed super soldiers? They are so strong. They can kill ordinary people with one punch. Cough cough. Can you guys at the back step back a little? I'm a little scared now. The soldiers in the crowd were stunned. The soldiers sitting in the innermost circle swallowed their saliva and subconsciously moved back, afraid that the fight between the two would affect them. Kyle blocked the fist once again. Although he was able to do so with ease, he was gradually losing his breath under the pressure of the crazy attacks. This made Steve secretly happy. He felt that he had made the right bet by persisting in attacking. However, as they brushed past each other, he suddenly saw a smile appear on Kale's cold face. He was actually smiling. Steve's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but at this moment, the two of them were entangled in close combat, and it was already impossible to stop the attacks at hand. He could only brace himself and continue to fight to the end. Have you finally realized it? Kale maintained the smile on his face. Steve understood him very well and knew that his offensive methods were much stronger than his defensive methods. Therefore, from the very beginning, he desperately strengthened his offense, not wanting to let him take the initiative to attack. It's a pity that you don't understand. You're giving up your natural defensive advantage just like that. Kale lightly shook his head. It was a bit like in online games, when a player with limited privileges met a player with cheats. Not yet. Steve struggled to get up from the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said resolutely, I haven't admitted defeat yet. I can still fight like this for another day. Up to you. Kale shrugged and was about to continue attacking, but Steve's next move made him reveal a surprised expression. It was Steve who had put the Aegis of Ada Man on his left hand. That's right, otherwise it would be too boring, Kale said with a smile. He suddenly increased his speed and rushed forward. Steve didn't attack rashly this time. Looking at Kale who was rushing over, he calmly raised his shield and suddenly waved his left hand forward. The shield flew out of his hand. He was using the shield as a long-range throwing weapon. Kale's pupils shrank. Looking at the incoming shield, he quickly raised his right fist and collided with it. The shield managed to block it, but with a swishing sound, the shield returned to its original direction like a boomerang. The shield. Not good. Kale realized something and wanted to retreat. But it was too late. Steve had already leaped in front of him, caught the shield with his left hand, and slammed it down from above. Kale could only use his elbow to hit the shield. As soon as his elbow landed on the shield, the force of his elbow was absorbed. At the same time, Steve's shield bash continued to descend forcefully, pressing Kyle's body down in an instant, forcing him to kneel on the ground to support himself. Even the mud that he had pressed down on had an obvious dent. Kale suffered a big loss when facing the characteristics of the Aegis of Ada Man for the first time. Chapter 36. How's this move? Steve held the round shield with both hands. Adding his own weight, he wanted to crush Kale. Not bad. Kale responded with difficulty. His left shoulder was firmly pressed against the shield. One of his knees and his right palm were pressed into the mud. Steve wanted to use the shield to press him to the ground. Kale wanted to push the shield away and resist. The game between the two had completely turned into a tug-of-war of pure strength. Kale, admit defeat, Steve said solemnly. He began to pour all his strength into his hands to press down. The shield was lowered bit by bit. After all, he had the upper hand. In terms of pure strength, Steve believed that he was not inferior to Kale. It's not that simple. Kale clenched his teeth and held on. He maintained his shield position without the slightest wavering. The shield was lowered. In fact, it was only the collapse of the mud. Although he was wearing a tight black combat suit, the muscles on his body were clearly bulging. His right hand, which was supporting the ground, had at some point clenched into a fist. The golden sunlight shone on Kale's steel-like body. At this time he was like a bronze statue that represented strength. Under the surprised cries of the group of American soldiers and Steve's incredulous gaze, the shield pressing down on Kale quickly rose back up inch by inch. You want me to admit defeat? That's far from enough. Kale pushed Steve's shield away and took a few steps back. He was a little exhausted as he gasped for breath. But now you're almost out of strength. Steve's eyes held a complicated expression. Kale had used all his strength to push the shield away. This had indeed won him a chance to turn the situation around. At the same time, it had also forced him into a desperate situation. Steve continued, your attack has no effect on this shield. Steve, you haven't forgotten, have you? Kale suddenly laughed and said, I haven't even used my weapon yet and you think you've already won? With that said, Kale reached behind him, grabbed the hilt with his left hand and pulled out the sodium carbon sword. Compared to Ardman's shield, which was painted with colorful patterns, the sodium carbon sword was a simple one-handed sword. Its smooth, mirror-like blade gave off a suffocating sense of sharpness. Although close combat isn't bad, it's still too troublesome to rely on close combat to kill enemies on the battlefield. Kale said coldly, his left hand gripping his sword tightly. He still had green ability cards related to sword techniques. However, what was more important was not just the sword technique, but the sharpness of the carbon sodium steel sword. Kyle's attack power could be increased by several levels in a straight line. Even if the weapons in his hands were carbon sodium steel claws and carbon sodium steel blades, they would not be that bad. As long as he had a sharp enough weapon, Kale would be able to achieve a one-hit kill. At that moment, at the outermost edge of the crowd of soldiers, Joseph looked at the two people holding weapons in the center of the area and suddenly walked quickly to Carter's side. Agent Carter. Those two brats are playing for real now. If we don't stop them now, there might be an accident. Carter shook her head lightly, her beautiful eyes not moving from the field at all. They're only playing for real now? Can't you see? They've been seriously trying to defeat each other all this time. Joseph asked in confusion, what's going on? Their fight is also very sudden. Isn't it almost time for the White Star Project to set off? I'm just guessing. A complicated expression appeared in Carter's eyes. Steve has been holding back a lot of energy for a long time and wants to vent it out. That's because no matter what he does, Kale can always be one step ahead of him and lead him forward. The qualification for the super soldier experiment, the Ardman's shield, these were all indirectly given to him by Kale. Even so, Steve still feels that the gap between him and Kale is too far. He doesn't even feel confident in his title of Captain America. Maybe he's questioning himself in his heart. If he has better opportunities and weapons, why can he only curl up under Kale's protection? He also wants to be in front of Kale and hold up the shield for him. So, this time as the captain, he's about to go to the enemy area to lead the soldiers in battle. Before that, Steve wants to regain himself and confidence in the battle with Kale. After Carter finished speaking, the fierce battle in the center of the area was also coming to an end. The sword and shield fiercely collided, and there were no sparks due to the kinetic energy dissipation. Only the crisp sound of iron striking echoed clearly in the square. After the sword strike and the shield respectively dissipated, the two men brushed past each other's shoulders and still punched each other's body with their fists. Kale and Steve flew out, rolled a few times on the ground and then quickly got up and fought again. Both of them were each other's best friends in this world, but they were also competitors. Each of them had their own pride and unyielding spirit. Both of them wanted to be in the forefront, and the winning era would be more of a stage and focus. Under the sun on the square, Kale and Steve, one holding a sword and the other holding a shield, finally charged at each other with a low roar. This shocking scene was frozen in the eyes and minds of more than 1,000 American soldiers at the base. Half a century later, it was still as clear as yesterday. And even half a century later, this scene would be sculpted by the most accomplished sculptor in front of the War Memorial Hall. Bang! The carbon sodium steel sword flew high, and after spinning countless times in the air, it stabbed into the mud not far behind Steve. Steve still maintained his posture of wielding the shield, and Kale flew out heavily, plowing a clear mark on the ground. In the end he lay on the ground, tired and motionless. Captain Steve. The soldiers were ready to cheer for the winner, but at that moment, Steve raised his hand, exhausted. I lost. On his neck there was a clear line of blood on the side. It looked like a small wound, but blood kept dripping from it. I'm really tired. Kale struggled to get up and patted the dust off his body. The final decisive blow was not his sword falling out of his hand, but he took the initiative to take a shield attack and threw the sword as a hidden weapon. If he hadn't held back, Steve would have been beheaded. Kale, you used all your strength, didn't you? Steve covered his wound and panted, looking straight at Kale, wanting an answer. Kale paused for a moment, then nodded. That's right. Although he still had stealth and vibranium arm guard that he hadn't used, Steve was already the most difficult and powerful opponent he had ever met. Is that so? Steve nodded with satisfaction, clenching his fists with determination. I'll let you go first this time, but one day I'll walk ahead of you. Otherwise, I'll be letting you down. Then I'll wait and see. Kale smiled faintly, looking around at the soldiers around him. After taking a breath, he said coldly, Are you ready? Follow us to the battlefield and destroy the enemy. Ready? The loud response resounded through the entire base. The 500 American soldiers stood up with a whoosh, looking fervently at the two people in the innermost circle. "Then take your weapons and follow our footsteps." Steve gave the order loudly, and the 500 soldiers gathered together immediately gripped the guns in their hands and collectively opened up a path. After this battle, the two were covered in wounds, but their prestige was several times stronger than before the battle, and the morale of the troops was unprecedentedly high. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Cale and Steve gave the order, and the two of them took the lead and rushed out of the base, leading the troops out. Looking at this scene, Joseph said in surprise, "These two people might be able to change the situation of the war." Chapter 37. More than a month later. New York, Brooklyn, Highland Street. The winter pedestrian streets gradually became lively under the morning sun. It was just after Christmas and the New Year was about to come. Although it was in the war stage of World War II, New York, a major European city, was still not affected by the smoke of war. In the winter morning, people in coats hurried on the streets, busy with their jobs and livelihoods. From time to time, some children in hoods could be seen holding a stack of black and white newspapers, walking quickly on the crowded streets and shouting, "The latest New York Times." Major Cale and Lieutenant Steve led the troops to destroy the German fortress base again. The Wall Street Journal. Two American heroes fought brilliantly again, and the German front line retreated 20 miles due to lack of resources. The iron-blooded officer who won every battle and turned the tide of the war. Today I will explain to you the enemy of 10,000 people. Major Cale's glorious path. The newspapers during this period were basically the first to print and publish the war reports on the front line, not to mention the news of victory. Once it was released, it would be snatched up by the citizens. The boy selling newspapers, whose face was red from the cold, bought 2 stacks of newspapers in just half an hour on the street where the cold wind howled. It turned out that even if World War II did not affect New York on the surface, it was enough to make people worry about the UA troops on the front line and hope and pray that they could end the war as soon as possible. "Can I have one?" A blonde girl wearing a purple scarf smiled and waved gently at the boy selling newspapers running across the street. The boy immediately trotted over, took the change and put the last newspaper in his hand into the girl's basket. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the girl's angel-like delicate face. He couldn't help but praise, "Big sister, you are so beautiful. You have a sweet mouth." The blonde girl's beautiful eyes curved into crescents, and her warm smile seemed to melt the snow around her. This made many gentlemen passing by on the street bump into the streetlights. "It's time to go home." Lucy exhaled a breath of cold air, elegantly holding the basket of vegetables and newspapers, and began to walk back home. Although it was called home, it was actually just the house where Cale used to live. Located at 199 Highland Street, it was a classic European-style duplex villa with a balcony garden. Lucy took off her boots and entered the house. There was a heater in the house, so the temperature was much warmer than outside. She took off her cotton coat, revealing her graceful figure that the sweater couldn't hide. After placing the basket on the table, Lucy changed her elegant and dignified appearance. She excitedly took out several newspapers from the basket and spread them out on the table. The newspapers all had headlines and pictures, and the main characters in the headlines of these newspapers were poles apart. It was either a stern young man who was commanding with a round shield, or a cold young man in black who was charging towards the enemy with a long sword in his hand. Below the picture in the newspaper, there was a detailed description of the person. Steve Rogers, 23 years old, Captain America, First Lieutenant. The first battle of Captain Steve's life was when he and Major Cale went deep into the third area behind enemy lines, broke through the factory base, rescued 500 American prisoners, and successfully broke out of the encirclement. He called himself Captain America and always rushed to the front with a shield. He led the team of soldiers to take down 5 German factory bases in a month, minimizing the casualties on his side. He was a patriot, a super soldier, and the embodiment of a hero who symbolized American justice. Lucy quickly browsed through Steve's profile, and her beautiful eyes anxiously fell on the other side, on a longer and more cumbersome profile. Cale Adolphe, 23 years old, the youngest major in history. Seeing this, Lucy showed a satisfied sweet smile. Her lips opened slightly and she read Cale's profile. Major Cale is the youngest person in the history of the United States to hold the rank of major. In the first counterattack battle, he infiltrated the enemy base with a huge difference in numbers of 1 to 100, annihilated the German commander and the main forces, and successfully won the opportunity to reverse the situation on the front line. So far, Major Cale has led the marching troops to battle and ended in complete victory, often with extraordinary feats of one person fighting against an entire enemy team. According to incomplete statistics, the number of enemies killed under his name has exceeded 10,000, and he is a true enemy of 10,000. He is a hero who represents the strength of the United States. He was a war maniac that struck fear into the hearts of the German army. His nicknames were Devil and Dick, translated as Demon and Killing God. The latest news is that the President of the United States has awarded Major Cale the Medal of Honor. After reading it smoothly in one breath, Lucy's face was flushed with joy. Although such reports praising Cale were frequently published during this period, she would always buy such newspapers and read them day after day. A few months ago he was just a recruit who broke into the enemy base and he became a major so quickly. A hero who represents the strength of the United States, Lucy pouted her pink lips. She was really under a lot of pressure now. Not to mention New York, even the young women of the entire United States were infatuated with the cold young man in front of her in the newspaper. After all, the movie screening rooms in some big cities would also show some battle records and propaganda films from the battlefield from time to time. And Cale and Steve could be said to be the main characters in the war documentaries in the past few months. The perfect posture of bravely killing the enemy, the powerful individual strength of one against many, and the young and handsome face were all shown. On the screen, the action of waving their arms or looking at the camera was enough to cause some young girls to scream fanatically. No matter what, I met Cale first. Little Lucy, you have to cheer up, there is no reason to lose to those women. Lucy secretly encouraged herself and curled up on the sofa, a bit like a woman waiting for her husband to return. Finally, she muttered bitterly, it's almost the new year, I don't know when Cale will come back. At this time, hundreds of miles away from New York in the Glacier Mountains in the enemy's rear area. Below, a rugged train track was laid out from the mountainside to the distance. There were snow-capped peaks everywhere, the cold wind was fierce and snowflakes were falling. On one of the snow-capped peaks, a group of dozens of U.S. soldiers wrapped in military coats were lurking, listening to intelligence messages from the rear base through monitoring instruments. Fry said with certainty, it has been confirmed that there is an important figure of the Hydra organization on the train that is about to pass, a newly appointed middle-aged German scientist, Werner Terse. Okay, let's get on the train. This time we only got prisoners so we don't need so many people. Cale said quickly, looking at Steve next to him. Steve nodded, me, you and Baki will go. The three of us are good at fighting alone, no matter how many guards there are on the train, we are not afraid. Okay. Cale nodded in agreement. In fact, he was not afraid of danger if he went alone. Cale, Steve, Baki. Most of the German guards didn't even have time to use these high-end weapons on the intruders before they lost their life force. Drip. Cale's face was cold and expressionless. His left hand held the long sword that was dripping with blood. The vibranium arm guard on his right hand was still smoking. His leather military boots slowly stepped on the scarlet and sticky pool of blood. He looked around at the piles of supplies in the train. Suddenly, he sensed something and raised his head to look at the corner of the train. There was a surveillance camera with a weak red light. Have you noticed me? Cale's mouth curved into a cold smile. He lowered his body and picked up an energy pistol glowing with blue light from the ground. He aimed, pulled the trigger, and a small blue laser shot out from the muzzle. The surveillance camera turned into dust. On the other side of the surveillance camera was the main driver's cabin of the train. A bald, bespectacled, middle-aged professor and the train driver's eyes showed a genuine fear that came from the depths of their souls. The executioner is really here. We are dead. The guards on the train can't stop him. The train driver's mouth seemed to be frozen, and his voice was constantly trembling and out of tune. Major Cale of the U.S. Army was not only famous in the U.S., but also in Germany. But this reputation was built on the bodies of thousands of German soldiers. The German army hated Cale to the core. They even wanted to send bombers to the front line to destroy him. He was like a nightmare that haunted the hearts of the Germans. Even the bravest and most iron-blooded soldiers would be afraid when they heard the name Cale before they even fought. Shut up. Send more guards to guard the main driver's cabin. The bald professor slapped the driver's face and looked at the surveillance screen. A crazy emotion appeared in his eyes under his glasses. He whispered, "Come on, you came just in time. Even if I die this time, I will drag you to hell with me." After destroying the surveillance camera, Cale looked around in the carriage and began to draw cards to search for supplies. The reason why he liked to fight alone was that he had too many secrets about cards and didn't want to expose too much to others, even if the other party was Steve. Secondly, only by fighting alone would one be able to encounter good quality enemy supplies and draw cards from them. Especially with the Hydra organization developed independently in Germany, after they started to create new energy weapons, many military weapons reached the quality of blue item cards. Rechargeable laser gun, enhanced energy pistol, gem energy. Within 3 meters of Kale, all the blue item cards that could be drawn were directly reflected in his vision. There is a box of gem energy, Kale blinked in surprise. This was an unexpected gain. A box of gem energy often contained nearly 25 blue item cards. Sometimes, when attacking a base factory, one might not even find half a box of gem energy cubes, which were used as raw energy materials. Steve and Baki, these two should be able to easily take care of the guard in the driver's cabin. Kale whispered softly, but his mind didn't stop. At the rate of 1 gem energy cubes per 3 seconds, he converted all the energy cubes in the box into cards and stored them in the card space. For more than a minute, no enemy guards came to interrupt the rhythm of drawing cards. Kale finished drawing and was about to stand up when the train suddenly shook violently, causing him to stagger and almost fall to the ground. What's going on? Kale frowned, quickly opened the carriage door, and poked his head out to look at the front of the train. He saw a huge gap in the front of the train. Thick smoke billowed out of the driver's cabin, and red flames could be seen flickering. In order to save me, he was thrown out of the train by the explosive wind pressure of the bomb on the train driver and fell into the bottom of the snowy mountain valley hundreds of meters high. Did he suffer the same fate? Winter Soldier. Kale's expression did not change. He knew that although Baki was not dead, his future would be more painful than death. He had been controlled by the other country's government as a war machine devoid of humanity for more than half a century. Kale was not good at comforting people. He could only pat Steve on the shoulder and say, "Take it easy. As a soldier, sacrifice is common on the battlefield. Don't let this affect the mission." "I know." Steve took a deep breath and carried the unconscious bald doctor on his shoulder. He said, "But the mission is completed. The target wanted to bite the poison capsule in his mouth and commit suicide. I knocked him out." It seems that the information is correct. The members of the Hydra organization like to hide poison in their mouth and commit suicide. Kale nodded and said thoughtfully, "Now we just need to take the target and evacuate from here safely. That's the problem." A bitter smile appeared on Steve's resolute face. He pointed to the bridge that was covered in thick smoke and flames. That powerful explosion not only blew up the steel body on both sides of the carriage, but also destroyed the control panel of the train. Now the train is constantly accelerating and out of control. Indeed, the train should be traveling at more than 150 kilometers per hour now, and it's still accelerating. It's impossible to stop. Kale looked at the sparks splashing on the wheels and quickly thought about countermeasures. At such a fast speed, even if he jumped from the train, his life would be in danger, not to mention the cliffs on both sides of the train. If it was only one person, he could use the forced teleportation of sneak directly. But there was also Steve and a target hostage. It would not work at all. Steve gave his own suggestion. "It seems that we can only go to the rear of the train and separate the connection between the front and rear of the train. I hope this will stop the train." Kale shook his head and said, "You think too much. If I remember the map of the nearby glaciers correctly, as soon as the train leaves this long and straight mountain tunnel, it will turn immediately. At this speed, even if the front of the train is separated from the carriage will still have no time to stop before it derails and falls." Steve asked with a dignified face, "What should we do? We can't do nothing and just wait for the train to derail and fall, right?" Kale was silent for a moment, then suddenly stared at Steve and asked, "Do you trust me?" Steve was stunned for a moment, then he answered without hesitation, "Of course. In this world, if I don't trust you, who else can I trust?" "Then don't do anything." Kale smiled mysteriously. After making the decision, he relaxed a lot, and his face relaxed without any sense of crisis. He said with certainty, "When the train rushes out of the tunnel, the moment it derails and falls, I tell you to jump, and you take the hostage and jump off the cliff in the valley." "Jump off the cliff?" Steve looked at Kale in surprise, still confused. The bottom of the cliff valley was not a deep river, but a hard frozen river. "Don't you trust me?" Kale shrugged. "Okay, if you tell me to jump, I'll jump." Steve did not ask. He carried the hostage on his shoulder and was ready to face the wall of the tunnel. In just a few seconds, the train reached the end of the tunnel at a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour. The darkness was instantly dissipated by the daylight outside. The glaring white light outside made Steve squint his eyes involuntarily. At the same time, the train also trembled violently, and the wheels completely cracked under the splashing of sparks. Crack. The whistling train was supposed to turn according to the track, but under the excessive speed, it suddenly derailed from the track at the corner of the track and rushed toward the hanging cliff. The cold wind and snow poured into the carriage crazily, and the feeling of weightlessness of the train that was about to fall spontaneously arose. Steve jumped. Before Cale finished his words, he had already jumped out of the carriage. Chapter 40. Hundreds of meters above the bottom of the glacier valley, Cale and Steve, who was holding the hostage, fell quickly against the cold wind and snowflakes. A dozen train carriages not far from them also burst and rolled down the mountain. Falling from such a high altitude, he had experienced many parachuting experiences, but this time he didn't wear any parachuting tools. The physique of a super soldier, no matter how high, was only in the range of the most perfect human strength, and the range of tolerance for fatal crises was only 3 to 5 times that of a normal human. Falling from a cliff hundreds of meters high, this should be a situation of certain death. The moment before he jumped out of the carriage, Steve still didn't understand how to escape in such a situation. But Steve still jumped down without hesitation because Kyle had been creating miracles since the beginning of the training base. He was like a pioneer, leading and guiding him forward. More importantly, he believed in Cale, and that was enough. Cale himself didn't think as much as Steve. After he jumped out of the carriage, he opened his hands with his face facing the sky, as if waiting for something. At this moment, 10,000 meters above the glacier mountain range. Whoosh! A light blue beast shadow broke through the atmospheric clouds at high speed. Its sharp golden eagle eyes looked down, its huge wings full of feathers suddenly shrank, and its head dived to the ground. It was like an arrow, its speed breaking the sound barrier in a short moment, leaving a series of white circles in the sky. It's here. A smile appeared on Kyle's face when he saw the thin hole in the clouds in the sky. He had already summoned the Blue Eagle during this time and let the Blue Eagle scout in the sky within a few miles of his body, creating an exclusive personal air defense field. After all, he was now a major threat to the German army and the Hydra organization. A month ago, the enemy had sent fighter jets into the battlefield, dropping mines to kill him and Steve. The Blue Eagle's flying maneuverability was extremely strong, and in a one-on-one situation, a single fighter jet would be destroyed by its sharp claws before it could see its trace. The creatures summoned by the creature card would have intimacy, obedience, and a subtle telepathic connection with the card holder. However, in order to keep the creature card in a summoned state for a long time, it would need to be fed daily. What's here? Steve asked in surprise. His eyes were fixed on the ground below. His continuous descent made the ground at the bottom of the valley fly past his field of vision. Before Cale could open his mouth to explain, in the next moment, a huge shadow shrouded their bodies, accompanied by a strong wind pressure. Chirp! The Blue Eagle let out a loud cry. It flapped its wings and quickly approached. First it used its body to catch Cale. Then it used one of its claws to grab Steve and the hostage. My God, what kind of bird is this? Steve was shocked. He turned around to look at the Blue Eagle, whose wingspan was at least 10 meters wide, and opened his mouth wide in shock. Chirp chirp. The Blue Eagle glanced at Steve, who was on its claws. Its blue feathered wings flapped downwards, completely shredding the wind and snow below, forming a small area hurricane that rushed into the sky. Steve was a little confused. He said hesitantly, "Why do I feel like I'm being despised by it?" Cale sat on the Blue Eagle's neck and said, "It's considered an eagle. It's very smart. It has the IQ of a 10-year-old human child. I've never seen such a big eagle." Steve knew that they were out of danger and relaxed a lot. He smiled bitterly and said, "Also, why are you sitting on its back? Why are you sitting on it? I'm going to be caught in its claws." Well, Cale paused as if he was lost in his memories. He began to make up a story and said, "I met it when I was young in the forest on the mountain. At that time, the Blue Eagle was the same size as a normal eagle. Later, it was infected by a radioactive drug in a factory, and its body mutated. Not only did its feathers change color, but it also became bigger and bigger." "I see." Steve nodded. He didn't have any doubts or questions. He directly acquiesced to Cale's words. "Steve, I hope that when you go back you won't tell anyone about the Blue Eagle, including Carter." Cale stroked the feathers on the Blue Eagle's head and said, "The Blue Eagle won't hurt humans. It only eats the beasts on the mountain. If some people with bad intentions know about its existence, they might try to hunt it down." "Okay, I won't tell anyone." Steve agreed without hesitation. Kale also secretly sighed in relief. The Blue Eagle was still too early to appear in the world of Marvel. After the 21st century, all kinds of mutations and technology emerged. Gods like Thor and Loki from myths and legends would travel around Earth for a few days. With the addition of alien magic to expand the minds of people on Earth, the existence of the Blue Eagle wouldn't be so surprising. After the Blue Eagle took the 3 people out of the valley, it landed them in the area around the snowy mountain. It then flapped its wings and disappeared between the clouds. Kale and Steve took the target hostage and rushed to the predetermined location. They met up with Frey's team and then returned to the base. That night, in the base's basement operations department, the large battle map was like wallpaper. It was pasted all over the wall. Among them was the battle map of the enemy's factory base. The 6 flagpole areas were circled with crosses, indicating that the enemy had been annihilated. That's it. Staff Sergeant Baki the target hostage has now been handed over during a mission at the base for interrogation. The Hydra organization is now separated from the German army. According to the information we know, the leader of Hydra, Red Skull, also has a mysterious item that can create unlimited energy. Do we need to snatch it? I still remember the hatred of Red Skull. Of course, even if we don't make unlimited energy, we can't let such a dangerous organization like Hydra abuse it at will. On a combat desk with focused lights, Kale, Steve, Carter, and the colonel officer of the base's commander-in-chief sat in chairs and discussed. Major Kale, Lieutenant Steve. Please get ready. The colonel looked sternly at Kale and Steve opposite him and said sincerely, if we learn the whereabouts of Red Skull from the target of this mission, we will have to rely on you to attack with a shield and a sword. The shield represents the justice and protection of the United States, and the sword represents the strength and killing of the United States. Kale and Steve's military ranks are not low, but they are not very high, but their prestige and reputation in the country are far above some generals and officers. Therefore at this time, the commander-in-chief and colonel officer of the base did not have any arrogance and treated them as equals. Steve nodded in response. Understood, I will prepare in advance. Once there is news, we will leave immediately. The target is Red Skull. You don't have to say that, I will insist on going. Kale said coldly. Chapter 41. Late at night, in the single officer's room assigned to him by the base, Kale, who had just finished showering, was only wearing a pair of large underpants. His upper body was bare and his back was against the bed. He was resting with his eyes closed in a semi-reclining position. Of course, he was not thinking about life or anything. Instead, he entered the card space with his mind. In the endless white space compared to 2 months ago, there was a big difference. Previously, all the cards were mixed together and spun into a ball endlessly like a hurricane. After Kyle sorted it out, the 3 types of cards, ability, item, and creature, were now divided into different storage areas. In addition to the 3 main card classification areas, there were 2 other emergency card areas and a material card area. The emergency card area. That was to store cards that needed to be used directly in an emergency, such as Hound, Energy Laser Gun, Emergency Box, Blue Eagle, and so on. There was not a single ability card in the emergency card area because as long as the ability card was stored in the card space, it could be used directly. It did not need to be materialized like items and creature cards before it could be used. As for the material card area, it stored some useless item cards, which were the materials for the sacrificial card draw. Kale's mind entered the card space and headed for the material card area. After more than a month of plundering, most of the material cards looted from several fallen German factory bases were stored in the material card area. At this time, nearly 100 blue item cards and thousands of green item cards were densely piled up in the material card area. Looking at them gave him a sense of accomplishment. After storing the material cards for so long, it's time to try my luck. Kale took a deep breath and suppressed his usual nervousness of drawing cards. Many of Germany's energy factories had been completely destroyed. In addition, the decisive battle with Red Skull was imminent. At this point, there was not much point in continuing to store cards. Kale began to count the number of item cards in the material card area and quickly came up with an accurate number. Green item cards, 1,020 pieces. Blue item cards, 86 pieces. Converted to the number of sacrificial card draws, green quality cards could be drawn 102 times and blue quality cards could only be drawn 8 times. Then let's start with the green ones. Kale waved his hand and selected the 10-20 green item cards floating in the material card area. Selection successful. Sacrifice the draw card. 102 consecutive draws. You have sacrificed German Premium Helmet, X26, German Combat Uniform, X11, High-Powered Sniper Rifle, X6, Reconnaissance Instrument, X3, Energy Magazine, X89, High Explosive Grenade, X22, Anti-Infantry Mine, X9, Successful Draw. Is this useful or not? Kale was a little sad as he looked at it. He did not stop and continued with the card draw. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining Disguise Voice Changer. God, what do I need this voice changer for? Draw again. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining Add Life. Very good, give me more lifespan tonight. Continue. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining Conan's Glasses. Kale was speechless. What the hell is this? Draw again. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining Senza Bean. Senza Bean? Kale suddenly became spirited and quickly took the newly drawn blue card. Senza Bean. A bean planted by Corinne. As long as it is consumed, no matter how serious the injury is, even if the person is close to death, it can still restore the body to its peak state. Blue item card. This is not bad, it can save my life. Kale revealed a smile and divided the Senza Bean into the emergency card area. Tonight's draw was not in vain. Kale saw that there were still 2 blue quality card draw chances left. He waved his hand and simply selected all the remaining 20 blue item cards. You have sacrificed Gem Energy X20? At least, can I get another blue skill type card? As soon as Kyle thought of this, 2 new cards gradually emerged from the card space. One was dark blue, and the other was purple, which he had never seen before. The dazzling light emitted by the 2 cards instantly became the focus of the card space. Chapter 42. My luck has exploded. The moment the purple card was drawn, Kale's mind went blank, and he felt a little dizzy from the immense joy. This happiness came too suddenly, and it was impossible to guard against. He was not mentally prepared at all. After being dazed for a moment, Kale's thought incarnation quickly grabbed the purple card and looked at the card information. Super large ancient dragon turtle. A super large sea monster that existed in ancient times. Its appearance is similar to a snapping turtle. Purple creature card. Its natural lifespan is tens of thousands of years. Its defense is amazing and can easily resist the bombardment of large firearms. It has a gentle personality and low combat ability. Its movement speed on land is extremely slow, and its speed on water is the speed of a normal speedboat. Its biggest characteristic is that it is very large. Its width and length are over 2,000 meters. There are very few creatures in the universe that can be larger than it. Because of its large size, the ancient dragon turtle only enters Arabia once every 100 years to maintain its vitality through constant hibernation. It continues to eat the microorganisms in the ocean. Sometimes it will sleep for several months, causing the turtle shell on its back to accumulate over time and become the base of a reef, forming a large tropical forest island. Current status: can only be summoned in areas with sufficient water resources. How is this a creature card? It's clearly a mobile island fortress. Kale exclaimed. Purple cards were indeed far superior to blue cards. The only flaw was that this was a creature card. If it was a purple ability card, it was hard to imagine how much it would increase his strength. Although he could continue drawing in the future, the energy factories in Germany had basically been wiped out, and there would be very few blue cards in the future. Perhaps for a long time in the future, this will be the only purple card in the card space. Kale sighed and placed the super large ancient dragon turtle at the top of the creature card area. His gaze naturally fell on another blue rare quality card, and as soon as he saw the name of the card, he was instantly dumbfounded. Initial symbiotic venom, a sentient alien symbiotic life form. It usually appears in liquid form. Venom needs to combine with a host to survive. It usually turns into clothes and wraps around the host, increasing the host's strength and abilities. It is extremely afraid of ultrasound and high temperatures. Its learning ability was extremely strong. It would constantly learn the host's language, personality, abilities, and so on. It would also grow rapidly as the host grew stronger. Current status: quick learning, transmogrification of seen clothes, defense against ordinary bullets, strong adaptability, liquid repair. You will be called Venom from now on, understand? Kale tried to open his mouth, and the liquid creature on his hand suddenly secreted more liquid, extending and covering his arm happily. Kale didn't want to be wrapped into a black mass, so he pointed to the combat uniform on the hanger and ordered, "Try transforming into that." Gurgle, Venom seemed to understand Kale's words, and an extended black line wrapped around the combat uniform. After a few seconds, the liquid body quickly covered Kale's body below the neck. Under Kale's gaze, Venom then transformed into the black combat uniform set by Howard at a speed visible to the naked eye, and there was no difference at all from the outside. This feeling. Kale suddenly got up from the bed, stretched his arms and tried to move. The combat uniform transformed by Venom was not only more comfortable, but there was also an exciting feeling of strength increase in his heart. His strength has increased by nearly 1/5. Kale secretly thought, clenching his fist covered by the Venom glove, he could clearly feel the obvious increase in his strength. This is still the initial Venom. After following him to the battlefield and adapting to the host's body growth, Venom will become more and more powerful. In the future, you need to maintain the transformation of the combat uniform outside, and you can't reveal your liquid form in front of others, understand? Kale warned, pulling the cross pattern on his chest, and the Venom combat uniform seemed to be highly fibrous and full of extensibility, and it bounced back playfully. The original combat uniform was actually of good quality, but every time he came back he had to clean the bloodstains and stains, and Kale was used to using the vibranium arm guard on his right hand to block the energy laser, which often led to the need to let Howard repair the right sleeve of the combat uniform after returning from the war. Chapter 43. In the dead of night, the disciplined UA military base was silent in the dark night, but subtle movements continued to sound in an officer's single room. Under the dim yellow light, Kale wore the Venom-transformed battle suit and did warm-up exercises in the single room, using the entire ironwood single bed as a barbell to adapt to his increased strength by lifting weights. With the rhythmic bulging of his abdominal muscles and the high-load exercise of his hands and feet constantly warming up, the battle suit gradually fit with the surface of Kale's body as the host, like a layer of black leather skin, clearly showing the muscular contours of the perfect body below. "Venom, you are very happy, right?" Kale said with a smile. Not only could he clearly feel the joy conveyed by Venom, but this joy also made him energetic and in a good mood. After Venom and the host fuse, their strength and emotions will intertwine, affect each other and sublimate on the basis of this. Today is also the first day of Venom's birth, plus the first symbiotic fusion with the super soldier physique card holder. It was so excited that it couldn't stop. However, there is likely to be news of Red Skull's whereabouts tomorrow, and the mission is imminent, so I can't waste time with it. Kale exhaled a breath of hot air, put the single bed on the ground and comforted the Venom battle suit. "Okay, I will take you out for a walk tomorrow. If you continue like this, you won't be able to sleep tonight." Just as he was about to take off the Venom battle suit, there was a knock on the door. "It's so late, who is looking for me?" Kale was surprised and patted the Venom battle suit comfortingly before walking over to open the door. When he saw the young man in pajamas outside the door, he couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Steve, what are you doing here so late at night?" "I want to ask you the same thing. It's so late at night, you haven't slept yet, what are you doing in the room?" Steve yawned sleepily, his blonde hair was messy, and he had obviously just been woken up from his sleep. "By the way, the single room assigned to Steve is directly downstairs from my room on the second floor." Kale remembered and shrugged and said, "There was a cockroach in the room just now, I got up and killed it." "Are you sure you killed a cockroach?" Steve had a strange look on his face as he glanced at Kale's combat suit and said speechlessly, "If I didn't know, I would have thought that you just came back from the front battlefield." Kyle shrugged and said helplessly, "You know, I don't have any clothes to wear. Sometimes I just sleep in my combat uniform. It's also convenient to be on standby at any time." "Okay. Go to bed early, we may take action tomorrow." After Steve finished speaking, he rubbed his sleepy eyes and returned to his room downstairs. After closing the door, Kyle breathed a sigh of relief. That was close. If Steve had entered the room and seen the original suit on the hanger, he wouldn't have known how to explain it. It's time, of course. Venom of Venom of Venom, of Venom, of Venom, 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 Venom. Again. This time Kale was more alert. He quickly extracted the combat suit from the hanger and turned it into a card before walking over to open the door. "Steve, what are you doing here instead of sleeping?" When he saw the person outside the door, his words stopped abruptly. "Carter? What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" Kale asked with the corner of his mouth twitched. That's right. The one who knocked on the door was Carter, wearing simple long-sleeved pajamas. Her neck revealed some white skin, and her short blonde hair casually and lazily draped over her shoulders. Compared with her coldness during the day, she had a different kind of charm. "Do you still want to sleep tonight?" Cale secretly complained. Seeing that Carter didn't speak, he directly asked, "Do you want to come in and sit?" "In your dreams." Carter rolled her eyes at him and turned to lean on the wooden railing of the corridor on the second floor. Her back seemed to blend into the night. "I have something to say to you." "Don't worry." Cale thought of something. He walked out of the corridor and leaned on Carter's side. Facing the starry night sky, he whispered, "Tomorrow is the same. No matter how many times I will bring Steve back." Carter was silent for a moment. Her beautiful eyes glanced at Cale and said coldly, "Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to come back?" "Won't be able to come back?" Cale was slightly stunned. He shook his head and said, "I really haven't thought about this. Although I don't want to set a flag in advance, I still have some confidence in my own strength. This is not arrogance, but based on a certain understanding of the world of Marvel, and the estimation of the total strength of his own ability and equipment. Super soldier ability, physique, dozens of fighting skills, sodium carbon steel sword, vibrating gold arm guard, and the newly drawn Venom suit tonight. The rest of the life-saving Blue Eagle and Senzabine are not mentioned. If Red Skull is positioned as a villain at the current stage, Cale really doesn't put him in his eyes. Seeing a brainless wave of head-on attacks, let's see if he can block it." Carter continued, "It's good for people to have confidence, but there's always a chance. Cale, you always rush to the front so unscrupulously. Aren't you afraid that one day you will fall? Are you concerned about me? Are you afraid that I will die on the battlefield?" Cale blinked in surprise. This woman seems a bit abnormal tonight. "Of course." Carter nodded and admitted, "To be exact, you are one of the candidates for me to record and perfect the super soldier data. If you don't come back, it will be a big loss for our army." "I only have research value? I am now a major and American hero. Show me some respect," Cale retorted. At the same time, he seemed to be aware that something was wrong with the Venom combat suit on his body and glanced back subconsciously. He didn't know when it happened, but a liquid black line separated from the back of the Venom combat suit, and slowly extended towards Carter's body like a tentacle. Carter put her hands on the wooden railing and supported her chin with one palm, completely unaware of Venom's probing intention on her back. "Don't make trouble, Venom." Cale's scalp tingled as he looked at it. He knew that Venom didn't have any malicious intentions. It was just a human being who met a female for the first time and was very curious about the body structure of a woman. "What's wrong with you? Why is your face so ugly?" Carter glanced at Cale in surprise. "It's nothing. Don't worry, I will come back safely tomorrow," Cale said, and in the corner of his eyes, Venom's liquid tentacle had approached Carter's back, and it was about to curiously try to cover it. "Stop it right now," Cale shouted in his mind, and his right hand quickly stretched out towards Venom's extended tentacle. His two fingers accurately pinched the front end of the black line and merged it back into the transmogrification glove. But then, his palm continued to move forward and gently patted Carter's raised buttocks. Pah! A crisp slap sounded in the night, and the atmosphere between the two suddenly solidified. Carter's beautiful face showed a shocked expression at first, but it quickly turned into a winter indifference, and her beautiful eyes stared fiercely at Cale. This is a misunderstanding, there are mosquitoes." Cale awkwardly retracted his hand, and even he didn't believe what he said. How could there be mosquitoes in the ice and snow of winter? "Feels good, right?" Carter snorted coldly, turned around and left the corridor downstairs and said coldly, "American hero? Major rank? I see it now, you are nothing more than a lecherous rogue. Forget it, let's sleep." Schmidt possesses power far beyond our imagination. The energy weapons are the best proof. Cale nodded in agreement. After all, he knew better than anyone what Red Skull had. Magic Cube. The basic usage of the space gem with the law of the universe is enough to create infinite energy, and the explosive power of the gem residual energy cube is simply unmatched by ordinary bombs. The colonel raised his voice and solemnly said, "We also have more important information. Schmidt plans to fly to the United States today. As long as he crosses the Atlantic, he will be able to flatten the entire East Coast in less than an hour. With the United States as the starting point, then upgrade to half of the world." "How much time is left?" Cale asked simply. The colonel quickly replied, "Less than 12 hours. "That's enough." Cale nodded confidently. The colonel shook his head and said, "The biggest problem now is that Hydra's last base is different from the factory bases you attacked before. It is located 500 feet below the Alps and is easy to defend. I have an idea. Steve, who had been silent, said, if we send the army directly, Schmidt will definitely close the gate of the base and escape. So we must send someone to lure them to open the gate of the Hydra base alone, and our army will take this opportunity to launch a siege. Then I'll go. Kale shrugged indifferently. He had so many life-saving means that even if he broke into the Hydra base alone, he was confident that he could retreat. No. Steve vetoed and looked at Kale and said, you're good at attacking. It's more appropriate for you to lead the army outside. And your appearance, are you sure you won't scare Schmidt away? The last sentence was obviously a little exaggerated and mocking. But everyone in the command room did not deny it but nodded deeply. The German executioner, the battlefield meat grinder, the hero symbolizing the strength of the United States, the demon code name full of murderous spirit. The deterrent force of Kyle's appearance on the battlefield was definitely no less than that of a fully armed elite army. Letting such a man lure the enemy's army? What a joke. The colonel also said half jokingly and half seriously, to be honest, if I were Schmidt and saw Major Kale break into the base, I would choose to run away directly. Don't describe me as an inhuman monster. Kale crossed his arms and glanced at them coldly. I came up with a plan, please let me go. Steve stood up and said firmly, as Captain America, I will also attract the Hydra organization to take the initiative to attack as bait. So I am the only suitable candidate. Kale looked at Steve, who had a resolute and righteous face, and an adjective came to his mind for no reason. I, Captain America, carry the hardest shield and take the most vicious beating. The situation is urgent and we can't delay it any longer. The plan is so set. In this mission, all base personnel will cooperate with the two of you to attack. The colonel finished and slammed his palm on the table to express his firm determination. Then let's start now. Destroy the last Hydra base and send the madman Schmidt to hell in one fell swoop. 3 hours later, near the Alps. The noon sun was bright and full, and the snow in the mountains and forests reflected the dazzling light. Boom. A burst of noisy engine sound suddenly sounded, and Steve, with a round shield on his back, rode a motorcycle quickly through the snowy forest. His hands clenched the handle and he kept speeding up. The back of the motorcycle sprayed blue flames and exhaust, the wheels crushed the snow and branches, and the full horsepower rushed alone towards the main gate of the Hydra base. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. These sounds came from behind Steve, but there were more than a dozen enemy motorcycles following closely behind like shadows. The fish took the bait. On the snowy mountain next to the forest, Kale looked down coldly at the motorcycle chase in the forest, like a hunter ready to hunt, patiently waiting for the fierce battle to come. Chapter 45. Steve Rogers, Captain America. As a veteran hero of the original Marvel world at this stage, he has the perfect physique of a super soldier, a superior mind for making decisions in battle, a dozen combat skills, and the hard and functional Ardman's shield. To some extent, his strength can be counted on one's fingers throughout World War II, and he is the most heroic soldier. Unfortunately, Kale, who has the ability to draw cards, appeared out of nowhere, causing Steve to be in the awkward position of He Xingyu. After all, Kale's glory is too dazzling. They are both soldiers and super soldiers, but in terms of personal strength, personal achievements, military rank, and even the influence and deterrence as an American hero, Steve will always be a younger brother compared to him. This makes Steve work harder during the mission. He wants to prove his captain's name and try to walk in front of Kale again and again. Kacha Steve looked coldly at the enemy motorcycle that was quickly approaching from behind in the rearview mirror. While constantly fueling and speeding up, he pressed a button on the motorcycle, and suddenly steel ropes sprayed out from both sides of the motorcycle. 3 or 4 enemy motorcycles in front immediately suffered, and the people tripped by the steel ropes rolled over and plunged into the snow on the ground. The rest of the enemy motorcycles dodged the ropes and continued to pursue. Soon, they were directly faced with the flames spurting out from the rear of Steve's motorcycle. They howled and fell in a small area in the sea of fire, followed by continuous explosions. Easily getting rid of the entanglement of the enemy motorcycles, Steve raised his head and looked at the main gate of the Hydra base that appeared in front of him, and a large number of guards with energy weapons poured out to meet the enemy, and he put the shield behind him in front of the motorcycle as protection. Under the bombardment of the energy tank, coupled with the intensive lasers emitted by the energy guns, Steve drove the motorcycle at full speed and rushed into the main gate of the base. This motorcycle had been modified by Howard. Naturally, it was equipped with a lot of advanced technology. Not only was there an ejector cable, there was fire at the back of the motorcycle, and there was also a self-destruct device. As soon as Steve drove into the Hydra base, he jumped off the motorcycle. The motorcycle continued forward and hit the main gate of the base. The powerful explosion instantly blew a gap in the half-open steel gate of the base, and a dozen guards around the gate were blown to pieces. Again? Steve raised his shield and shouted. Alone, he fiercely and valiantly charged into the group of enemies, fighting with dozens of guards as if he was fighting an entire army by himself. At the same time, on the side of the main gate of the Hydra base, less than 100 meters away, thousands of U.S. soldiers were quietly lurking, waiting for the right time to plan. At the front of the army, Cale and Fry were squatting on the edge of the snow, watching Steve, who was fighting a bloody battle through binoculars. Fry exclaimed, "Steve, although he's just acting as bait, he's really getting more and more like your fighting style." No. Cale shook his head gently and said slowly, "This should be his real style. Because what he symbolizes is only the justice and protection of the United States. Steve's offensive ability is not strong in other people's perception. In fact, always rushing to the front of the war as a lonely vanguard, defending everything with the shield and facing the enemy with the shield, this is the real posture of Captain America." Next. Under the original plan, Steve was defeated under the siege of a steady stream of armed guards and was detained by the guards and brought into the base. Seeing that the gate of the base was fully open again, Cale nodded and ordered, "Second Lieutenant Fry, you lead the army, directly attack the main gate of the base, annihilate and destroy all the equipment inside. And quickly surround this place, don't let go of even a single person from the Hydra organization." "Understood." Fry nodded and looked at Cale thoughtfully and said, "You're going to attack directly with the steel cable pulley?" "Of course." "Slow down, the Red Skull will run away, I have to enter the base as soon as possible and intercept him." Cale said, his blue eyes condensed a cold light, and his body produced a faint murderous aura. "It's time to settle the old score." At this time, inside the Hydra's last underground base in the hall on the second floor, Steve was detained by 2 armed guards and taken directly to the hall, stopping in front of a scarlet man with an ugly skull face. The man was the founder of the Hydra organization, Schmidt, also known as the Red Skull. He looked indifferently at Steve in front of him and said in a contemptuous tone, "You really inherited the arrogance of the United States, and you're even better than that. You came here alone to die." "But Professor Erskine ran away from me and left everything to you and Kyle," Roland said. At this point, the Red Skull gritted his teeth, and his angry and distorted expression made his face even uglier. He was also a super soldier, but he was not as good as the other 2, and he was disfigured to this extent. "The professor told me that you are a lunatic and don't deserve what he has." Steve smiled sarcastically. "Shut up. He's just jealous of my talent. What's so special about you?" The Red Skull growled, clenched his fists and punched Steve in the stomach. Cough. Steve coughed a few times in pain and was hit directly on the floor of the hall. The Red Skull looked down at him and pulled out a modified energy pistol from his waist. "Captain, let me end your life." In the face of life and death, Steve laughed and said, "Didn't you ask what's so special about me? Sorry, I'm just a short boy from Brooklyn, New York, but I have a brother." As soon as he finished speaking, from outside the window on the second floor of the base, a black figure suddenly broke the glass window and rushed into the base through the suspended steel cable. The 2 guards at the window were paying attention to the intruder. The young man in a black combat suit rolled on the ground, completely dissipating the impact. As he got up quickly, he pulled out a sharp one-handed sword with his left hand and quickly slashed at the guards. Puff. The 2 fully armed guards' heads flew high into the air like watermelons. All of this happened too quickly. The young man in the black battle suit only took half a second from the moment he broke into the moment he flew up and killed the 2 guards. When everyone on the second floor of the base looked over, they could only see the emotionless young man standing in the hall with a sword in his hand, looking coldly at them. Behind him were 4 decapitated bodies. "Cale, it's Cale from the U.S. Army." No one knew who shouted first in the hall on the second floor of the base, and then a suffocating sense of panic wrapped around most people's hearts. The members of the Hydra organization have been brainwashed and are absolutely loyal, but this does not mean that they have lost the thing called fear. Chapter 46. Cale is here. This sentence is often quoted by German citizens to intimidate children. At this time, in the hall on the second floor of the base, Hydra's armed guards looked at Cale, who broke in from the window, and their scalps tingled and they took a breath of cold air. They are not afraid of dying in battle, but they are afraid of being beheaded like pigs and cabbages. If the enemy is only Steve, The guards are still confident that they can subdue him by relying on the number of people, but with the addition of Demon Kale, it is quite different. In the hall of the base, Red Skull, who knows Kale's personal strength better, naturally understands this, so the moment he saw Kale's figure appear, he turned around without hesitation and decisively rushed to the underground passage of the base. Want to run again? Kale entered the hall and his eyes fell on Steve first. After confirming his safety, he locked onto Red Skull's location. At this time, seeing that Red Skull wanted to run, Kale snorted coldly and rushed straight to him with his sword in hand. At this time, Steve no longer pretended to attack violently. He got up and stunned the two guards who detained him behind him. He held the shield in his right hand and looked at Red Skull coldly. Red Skull apparently noticed the chill coming from the back of his neck. While desperately accelerating his escape, he shouted ferociously, "Everyone stop them for me." Yes. The armed guards in the base responded in unison, frantically building a defensive line with their bodies and shooting. "Stop me?" Kale sneered at the corner of his mouth and the sword in his hand fell. The two guards in front of him, holding the energy guns in their arms, were cut off and scarlet blood splashed on the smooth floor. But Kale was trying to continue to chase without slowing down, and the rest of the armed guards rushed forward again, forcing him to be distracted to solve the human obstacles on the road. It should be said that they are worthy of being completely brainwashed Hydra personnel. Knowing that there is a dead end, the armed guards still hold on as cannon fodder and shoot to intercept Kale and Steve's pursuit of Red Skull. Kyle quickly raised his right hand and blocked another laser beam. The sodium-carbon steel sword in his left hand was stained with blood from the blade to the hilt. Blood kept dripping down. He looked indifferently at the corner at the end of the hall on the second floor. Red Skull's back had gone far away and was about to completely disappear at the corner of the hall on the second floor. "Don't even think about running." Kale gritted his teeth. Stepping on the chest of the guard before him, he leapt up. While in the air, he threw out his left hand. Whoosh! The sodium-carbon steel sword was like a hidden weapon, quickly tearing through the air and rushing towards Red Skull's back with a sharp and harsh sound. "Get over here." Within 10 meters of others, coupled with the limited conditions under the light, Kale's sneak mode was also forced to be lifted, and his figure was completely exposed in the tunnel. How can he be so fast? At the same time, Red Skull also found Kale chasing behind him, and for the first time in his life he felt his scalp tingle. They are both super soldiers, how can the gap be so big? Why? Red Skull's face was distorted with grief and indignation, and he could only continue to escape in the position of prey, but the distance between him and Kale was constantly decreasing. "Schmidt, why don't we stop, have a drink and talk about life?" Kale teased, destroying Red Skull's psychological defense little by little. Red Skull was silent, and he wished his parents didn't give him an extra leg, and he tried his best to escape. "If you don't stop, then I will take the initiative to come over," Kale said, and regardless of the physical consumption, he accelerated again and rushed behind Red Skull with his sword. In the last 5 meters, an armed guard suddenly inserted from the intersection on the side of the tunnel, blocking behind Red Skull, and the weapon in his hand was aimed at the approaching Kale. Unlike other energy weapon muzzles that glowed with blue light, it was a huge gun nozzle connected to the gasoline tank behind the guard. Flamethrower? Kale just identified the weapon of the guard in front of him, and the one-handed sword was immediately inserted into the tunnel wall to stabilize his body, and he rolled back again. Chapter 47. In the narrow underground tunnel, the flamethrower was undoubtedly more lethal than energy weapons. The continuous eruption of a large area of flame made the air extremely hot. Kale frowned and retreated to a safe distance, using the concave wall of the tunnel as a cover to block the flames. If it was an energy weapon, he could use the vibranium arm guard to block the laser directly, but the large area of fire of the flamethrower just limited the defensive performance of the arm guard. What was even more deadly was the venom on Kale's body that turned into a battle suit. Venom, who was not afraid of bullets and lasers, bullets were enough for defense, and lasers could heal in liquid form, conveyed an instinctive fear to the host Kale under the threat of the high-temperature flames. "Okay, bear with it for a little longer." Kale comforted Venom verbally and wanted to throw the sword in his hand to shoot the guard. The moment he raised his hand, a disc-shaped object whizzed past him from behind. The disc-shaped shield accurately hit the head of the guard holding the flamethrower, directly knocking him out, and then quickly flew back in an arc, Adman's shield. Kyle quickly looked back and saw a tall young man rushing forward and catching the disc-shaped shield. It was none other than Steve himself, who had hurriedly chased after them. "Steve, Aren't you going to block and clean up the guards? Cale asked in surprise. Steve replied firmly, there are naturally soldiers to clean up the guards. How can you only deal with Schmidt alone? Up to you, then this time let's compete to see who can take down the leader of Hydra first. Before Kyle could finish his words, he had already dashed towards the end of the tunnel. No problem. Wow, you can't go back on your word. Steve shouted and kept up with Cale's pace without slowing down. The two quickly passed through the last section of the underground tunnel, one in front and one behind. Coming out of the tunnel, what appeared in front of them was a spacious underground base square with hundreds of armed guards holding energy weapons. How troublesome. Cale raised his sword coldly. Steve also raised his shield resolutely. The two people fighting side by side were not afraid of the 100 guards, but if they were delayed for too long, the Hydra leader Red Skull would escape. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, a large number of U.S. soldiers with rifles poured in from the underground tunnels in different directions of the underground square. They quickly fired at the armed guards when they saw them. One of the troops was led by Fry, who was wearing a left eye patch. He rushed to the front of the troops and waved at Cale with a smile. Cale, do you need reinforcements? Cale breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. You came at the right time. You're really reliable. As if hearing his words, the woman who had just come out of the tunnel with her army snorted coldly. Who isn't? Steve looked at the cold woman and said jokingly, Carter, you were almost late. I'm already late. Cale corrected him. This made Carter's beautiful eyes glare again. Aha, I'm the only one left, right? Only half a beat slower than the others, a playful and familiar voice sounded from behind. As the car lights continued to light up, a very crafty car drove over and stopped in front of Cale and the others. Howard, who was in the driver's seat, waved at them in his usual gentlemanly manner. Why are you, the logistics department of the science and strategy department, here? You even drove Schmidt's car into the base. Cale raised his eyebrows in surprise. Howard smiled and said, this is the final battle of the European War. Of course I have to come. After all, we are a team. A team? Cale was suddenly stunned. He looked around at Fry, Carter, and Steve, and finally the corner of his mouth could not help but curl into a subtle smile. That's right. Unbeknownst to them, they had already become a team, an invincible elite team. Now is not the time to chat, Schmidt is going to escape in the plane. Steve suddenly reminded, pointing to the end of the underground square. There, a large transport aircraft was slowly starting up, speeding up to the exit outside the base. It was obvious that Red Skull was on it. Howard quickly said, get in, I'll take you two there. Cale and Steve did not hesitate and directly jumped into the car, one on the left and one on the right. Howard stepped on the accelerator, and the engine roared as the car sped up to chase after the large aircraft. You must win. Carter clenched her fists with some worry and watched the back of the two until the car disappeared at the end of the underground square. On the plane passage in the underground square of the base, the gliders on both sides were 30 meters long, and the wide and long transport aircraft was gliding faster and faster. Not far behind it, a car with 3 people in it was chasing at full speed. The plane is about to take off, we can't catch up with it at this speed. Steve frowned as he looked at the aircraft in front, his face anxious. Cale was not worried at all. He glanced at Howard, who was still very calm in the driver's seat, and urged, don't hide it. If you have any secret black technology device, hurry up and use it. You've seen through it again. Unfortunately, I've refurbished this car once. Howard smiled and pressed a button under the steering wheel. The exhaust pipe at the back of the car immediately erupted with blue flames and powerful jets. The car, which was already over 100 kilometers per hour, suddenly increased its speed by more than 3 times. The strong wind pressure made Cale and Steve hold on to the car seat tightly. The car and the transport aircraft were getting closer and closer. When they were about 10 meters away, the area in front of them suddenly lit up, and the wheels of the transport aircraft began to lift off the ground. The plane is about to take off. Steve, send me up first. Cale said and stood up from the speeding car. Steve seemed to know what he was thinking. He squatted down slightly in the car seat and raised his shield at an angle. Let's go. Cale took a deep breath, stepped on the round shield, and jumped forward with all his strength. Steve also pushed the shield forward to increase the speed of his jump. Whoosh! Cale jumped high and quickly crossed 10 meters in the air. When he was still a little distance away from the fuselage of the transport aircraft, the long sword in his left hand suddenly stabbed into the wheel frame of the transport aircraft to stabilize it. Cale? Steve shouted and then jumped over. Kale reached out his right hand and grabbed his arm in time, pulling him together as the transport aircraft took off. On the airstrip of the base, Howard braked the speeding car in front of the cliff. He looked at the transport aircraft flying into the sky and the two people standing under the wheels and said softly, "I hope you'll succeed in this battle. When you come back, we'll drink to our heart's content again." At this time, the transport fighter should have already reached the airspace of the Atlantic Ocean. If Red Skull were to successfully transport the nuclear plane to New York, the consequences would be unimaginable. Steve also understood this and nodded in agreement. At this time, a team of armed guards from the Hydra organization trotted to the rear cabin of the fighter. "Have we been discovered?" Kale raised his eyes coldly and greeted them with a sodium-carbon steel sword in his hand, not forgetting to urge them, "Hurry up, I'll stop them. Enemy attack. Shoot directly." The team of armed guards saw Kale rushing over quickly and quickly fired with energy weapons. In an instant, the rear cabin of the transport fighter was illuminated by a dazzling blue laser. "These idiots!" Kale frowned. He was not afraid of the laser shooting, but that the laser shooting would become a fuse and accidentally trigger the explosion of the nuclear plane behind him. "I don't want to be buried with you cannon fodder. Die." Kyle's handsome face turned even colder. He gathered his strength and threw the sodium-carbon steel sword out, directly piercing through the guard captain who shot the most fiercely. The guard captain was firmly nailed to the metal wall of the rear cabin. In the face of a potential huge crisis, Kale did not choose to dodge. Instead, he raised his right hand wearing a vibranium arm guard and constantly blocked the energy laser shooting at him to avoid affecting the nuclear plane behind him. "Kale, catch it." As if knowing Kale's situation, Steve shouted and threw the Ada-man shield in his hand over. Kale leaped up and caught the round shield. He used his left hand to block the shield in front of him, blocking the intensive laser beams while sprinting in front of a guard. The guard raised his energy laser gun in horror, but the next moment, Kyle's right palm blocked the gun's muzzle. The shot of the laser beam hit the vibranium arm guard and bounced back, disintegrating and evaporating the energy laser gun and his arm on the spot. "All right." Steve's voice just sounded. As he manipulated the equipment button, the cabin of a nuclear plane was opened first and released into the ocean a kilometer below the transport fighter. The opening of the cabin also caused the air inside the rear cabin to surge out and flow backward, sucking many guards into the cabin. Kale smiled like a demon and looked indifferently at the guard who was kneeling on the ground and wailing with a broken arm. He picked him up with one hand like a chicken and threw him out of the open cabin behind him. Next, the guards who still wanted to resist were also thrown down one by Kale and Steve as goods from a height of thousands of meters. "Kale?" Steve suddenly shouted, but at some point, a guard approached the second nuclear plane that was being released, opened the cover and sat in the pilot's seat. Before either of them could stop it, the second nuclear plane was released. "Don't let him leave," Steve said and wanted to rush out of the cabin, but at the last moment he was intercepted by Kale and pulled back, watching the guard drive the nuclear plane away. "Don't worry, he doesn't need us to deal with him," Kale said confidently as he calmly looked at the vast blue sky outside the cabin. As if to prove his words, beyond the rear cabin's visible high altitude, a huge blue eagle tore through the clouds at extreme speed, dragging a series of air waves as it quickly chased after the nuclear plane that was gradually disappearing. "So you called the Blue Eagle over?" Steve looked at the Blue Eagle's figure in the distance and felt relieved. "It's the final battle of the European theater, we can't be careless." Kale shrugged and threw the shield back to Steve. He pulled back the one-handed sword from the metal wall and wiped the blood on the body of the guard's corpse. Chapter 49. The transport fighter slowly drove above the clouds, basking in the golden sunlight as it flew towards the end of the Atlantic Ocean. Kale and Steve, one holding a sword and the other holding a shield, cautiously entered the pilot's hall of the fighter. Red Skull obviously fled in a hurry and did not bring many armed guards with the fighter. Just now, all the guards were thrown out of the cabin by the two of them, so at this time, the spacious pilot's hall of the fighter was silent. On the pilot's instrument of the transport fighter, there was no one to be seen, and it was automatically flying according to the flight route set by the system. Directly behind the pilot's seat was a storage device glowing with a mysterious blue light. Through the glass storage device, the cube object inside could be vaguely seen. Kale immediately stared at the item placed in the storage device. His blue eyes reflected the blue light on the surface. Even if the distance was not enough for the card information to appear, He could be sure that there was no possibility of mistaken identity. The Tesseract, there can be no mistake. After all, even though they were 10 meters away plus the metal and glass storage frame, they could still clearly feel the heart-palpitating and intoxicating mysterious charm. Steve also wanted to slowly step into the hall with his shield, but Cale shook his head. With such a big movement in the rear cabin, Red Skull obviously knew that they had caught up with the fighter, so there was no need for a sneak attack. The fact that the enemy was in the dark and they were in the light was unfavorable, but the enemy was weak and they were strong. This was also a huge gap that the injured Red Skull could not reverse. Cale stepped forward with his sword and said coldly, "Schmidt, you're the only one left. You call yourself Hydra, so don't hide like a mouse. What other means do you have? Hurry up and use them." Seeing this, Steve spread his hands and stepped forward. He said in a warning tone, "It's time to put an end to all your evil deeds, Schmidt." In the face of the two people's sneers and questions, Red Skull's cold response suddenly came from the pilot's seat of the fighter's main hall. "You two are really endless. Do you really think you can win against me? Do you think that by wearing clothes with the United States logo, you prove that you are a national symbol? I have already seen the future. It is a beautiful world with no division of countries, one that is purely under my rule." After confirming Red Skull's location, Cale and Steve looked at each other and flanked him tacitly. Red Skull in the driver's seat was still talking to himself. Until the last moment, it's hard to say who will win or lose. As soon as he finished speaking, he slammed his palm on the steering wheel and pushed it to the ground. Bust. The transport fighter, which had been cruising smoothly, suddenly came to a stop. The next moment, a round shield quickly swept across a distance of more than 10 meters and suddenly hit the Rubik's Cube that reflected the star map, knocking it away from Cale and toward the opening in the window. That was close. Cale's face was pale. He was so close to being teleported to some godforsaken place by the Rubik's Cube. "I love Earth." Escaping from danger, Cale was overjoyed. He couldn't wait to give Steve a bear hug. "No!" Red Skull shouted. He looked at the Rubik's Cube that swept past him and was about to be thrown out of the window. He was stunned and hurriedly reached out to grab the Rubik's Cube. The star map that was about to dim continued to shine, and a rainbow beam of light blasted Red Skull from the sky, drowning him and evaporating his body. The Rubik's Cube completed this simple space manipulation and continued to throw the fighter into the sea. The fighter continued its 90-degree suicidal dive. When it was less than a kilometer from the ground, Cale moved under the strong wind pressure and reached the pilot's seat with difficulty and put the steering wheel back in place. As soon as he did this, the transport fighter immediately returned to normal, but the control instrument seemed to be on the verge of being damaged and was emitting smoke. Phew. Cale sat down on the floor tiredly. Although there was still strong wind pressure, the fighter was finally moving smoothly. Plus, the fighter wasn't at a high altitude, so the suction force was greatly reduced to an acceptable range. "Are you okay?" Steve smiled and came down from the top of the hall. He came to the pilot's seat and fastened his seatbelt. Cale waved his hand and said, "I'm fine. Hurry up and contact the base and let them arrange for this fighter to land." "Okay." Steve nodded and sat in the pilot's seat and began to operate the instrument. After a while, he seemed to have discovered something and his relaxed face gradually turned serious. "What's wrong?" Cale noticed the change in Steve's expression and couldn't help but stand up and ask. Steve took a deep breath and said coldly, "The situation isn't good. The autopilot can't be deactivated and a lot of the human pilot's functions have been damaged. This fighter is still moving towards the original New York location." "What?" When Cale heard this, he also realized the huge potential danger. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry, let me think of a way." "There's no time." Steve shook his head and quietly clenched his fists, as if he had made a difficult decision in life. He smiled and said, "Cale, quickly go to the back cabin and prepare a parachute." "What do you mean?" Cale was slightly stunned. Steve said firmly, "I'm going to sink this plane into the sea. Quickly prepare a parachute and jump." "Don't worry, there must be another solution. Besides, even if I have to stay on the plane in the end, Before Cale could finish his words, he was quickly interrupted by Steve. Chapter 50. In early 1944, the Hydra organization that wreaked havoc in Europe was completely annihilated. The founder of the organization, Schmidt, was sanctioned by Cale and Steve and was judged to have died on the spot. When this important news of the battle was sent back to the US, it instantly led to a grand celebration across the country. Countless soldiers who had returned to the base from the hospital or from the battlefield gathered together to raise their glasses and drink in high spirits. Cheers to victory. Cheers to Major Cale and Captain Steve. Cheers to the heroes. I hope the world will usher in peace as soon as possible. In countless bars in big cities, such cheers resounded throughout the night. In the same month, the German army, which lost its manufacturing factories, was greatly weakened and withdrew from the front line on a large scale. This also became a major omen of Germany's declaration of surrender soon. However, in the festive atmosphere of the great victory of the Western European War, the two heroes, Cale and Steve as the protagonists, were like fireworks following the end of the artillery fire of the battle, never to return. Although in the end, Lieutenant Steve got in touch with the U.S. military base through the communicator from the enemy's out-of-control fighter, the signal was quickly cut off. He only left an intermittent message: sink the out-of-control fighter into the Atlantic Ocean. Do not let it enter New York. As for Major Kyle, it was as if he had followed the fighter jet that had gone out of control, completely disappearing without a trace. Half a month later, somewhere on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, the warm morning sun shone down, painting the blue waves and waves with a layer of shiny golden edges. A modern white two-story sailboat sailed slowly on the sea, like a small leaf drifting with the waves and sea breeze. On the open floor of the white sailboat, a blond young man wearing sunglasses lazily reclined on a sun chair with his hands behind his head, looking particularly casual and comfortable. He only wore a pair of beach pants, and his upper body was bare with perfect abs forged by steel craftsmanship, allowing the sun to bathe his strong and perfect body. Next to the sun chair, on a round table with a small sunshade, a creature with a black liquid shape was moving around, as if it was disgusted by the hot weather. I haven't relaxed like this in a long time. Cale, who was lying on the sun chair, couldn't help but sigh. Ever since he was reborn into the world of Marvel during World War II, he had been in constant war for several months. Even if he had the extraordinary physique of a super soldier, his body had to be in a state of high alert at all times. Perhaps an energy laser, a high-explosive grenade, a sniper rifle, or even an indiscriminate carpet bombing from a bomber could send him straight to the sky. Even if Cale was in a deep sleep after a long period of war, if someone suddenly approached his bed, even if he wasn't awake, his body would instinctively react and subdue the enemy. Fry, Steve, and even Carter had all suffered such losses. Think about it this way. Isn't it better to just follow Brandt's suggestion and return to New York to be a normal citizen? This thought quickly flashed through his mind, and Cale did not continue to think about it. With the ability to draw cards, if he really cowered in a seemingly safe city like that, even he would look down on himself. Instead of worrying about the potential crisis in the future, it was better to take the initiative to walk on the dangerous path where opportunities coexisted with danger. He would continue to strengthen himself, improve his status and reputation until he was fearless in the face of any enemy. Without joining the frontline war, where would he get so many free materials to draw? Without fighting side by side with Steve, where would he get the super soldier ability? This was Cale's true belief. Rather than a hero fighting for the UA, it was better to say that he was a warrior fighting for his own future. In addition, in the process he gained the sincere friendship of Steve, Joseph, Fry, Howard, and Carter, which made him feel very gratified. Cale's thoughts were running wild when suddenly, a loud eagle cry came from the sky, and then the shadow cast by its huge wings completely covered the sailboat. It's back. Cale sat up from the sun chair and looked at the blue eagle that flew close to the sea. Its flapping wings stirred up the waves, throwing up waves. Cale asked the blue eagle, "How is it? Have you found any traces?" "Sure." The blue eagle cried softly and shook its head like a human. Cale frowned and waved to the side. "Continue to search in this direction within 20 miles of the sea." The blue eagle's sharp beak tapped lightly, flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Soon it disappeared into the clouds. After Steve flew away with the out-of-control fighter, Cale later asked the blue eagle, which had returned from the nuclear explosion, to search for traces of the fighter. Unfortunately, there were no clues after half a month. The Atlantic Ocean was vast and boundless. According to the original movie, it was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack if it was frozen and sunk to the bottom. "Looks like I have to give up." Cale sighed and was about to consider the trip back to the military base. At this moment, a shallow black shadow emerged from the bottom of the sea beside the sailboat. What? A great white shark suddenly jumped out of the sea and stuck out half of its body. It swam in the sea beside the sailboat, nodding and blowing bubbles at Kyle as if it was asking for praise. Cale's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the great white shark nearby and asked to confirm, "Did you really find that thing?" The great white shark continued to jump out of the sea and splash the water to show its attitude. "Venom, go with Xiao Xia and fish that thing up." Kale thought for a moment and turned his eyes to Venom, who was lazily lying on the table. Gurgle. Venom was a little disinterested as it turned into countless black silks and jumped off the table. It really had no interest in such a weak and low IQ animal like sharks, but since it was Care's order, it could only obey. The black liquid threads wrapped around the great white shark in the sea and quickly covered its entire body. It was as if there was a layer of hard, dark keratin membrane. Even the great white shark's eyes turned red, and the teeth in its mouth became even more ferocious and terrifying. Venom was attached to the great white shark, so naturally, it was the main body of the shark. "Go and come back quickly. By the way, don't touch that thing directly with your body." Kale thought for a moment and put 2 wooden boards directly on the teeth of the venom shark. "Clamp it and bring it up." The venom shark swung its tail and quickly dived into the sea. After a while, its figure emerged on the surface of the sea again. At the same time, the brilliant blue light also lit up the sea. The venom shark's head poked out of the sea, and Kyle's eyes immediately fell on its mouth. There was a square block of blue light sandwiched between 2 wooden boards, and it contained a mysterious and profound aura. Chapter 51. Rubik's Cube, that is, the shape of a square cube. Observing from a close distance, the appearance of the Rubik's Cube was constantly overflowing with a mysterious aura, as if it contained a small universe. Kale suppressed his inner excitement and materialized the vibranium arm guard item card and wore it on his bare right hand. Only then did he reach out to grab the Rubik's Cube that was clamped on the wooden board in the venom shark's mouth. It wasn't until the vibranium arm guard's hand held the Rubik's Cube that 2 glowing card information jumped out in Kale's field of vision. The colors of the 2 cards were not white, green, blue, or purple, but they were almost colorless with a pure crystal-like color. Rubik's Cube, a container containing one of the Infinity Stones, the Space Rough Stone, also known as the Infinity Cube. Colorless item card. With the power of space, it can open the door of space and teleport people and items to any place in the universe. Current status: cannot be extracted, connected with the space gem, difficult to use. The second colorless card was almost attached to the previous colorless card, like an overlapping shadow. Space gem. One of the 6 infinity stones in the universe, the gem that controls space. Colorless item card. It was almost the first thing that existed in the universe, and it was also almost the most powerful object in the universe. Using this gem, you can move yourself or all objects to any space in the universe in an instant. You can also distort or reorder space according to your own will, and you can easily achieve space transmission, space freezing, and space backtracking. Current status: can be extracted, difficult to master and use. 2. Colorless item cards? Kale was a little confused for a moment. He thought it was just a Rubik's Cube item card, but the card drawing ability distinguished the gem from the Rubik's Cube container. The container can't be extracted, but the space gem can be extracted. Should I draw? Kale thought carefully, weighed the pros and cons, and soon came to a decision. Draw. It would be a waste not to draw. Even if this divine item was placed, it would be idle on Earth for more than half a century until Thor's younger brother, Loki, came in the 21st century, and gradually unearthed the mystery of space transmission. Although it was the time for Thanos to start collecting gems, this Infinity Stone was also a hot potato, but if he had the opportunity to study and master the extraordinary ability of the space gem first, that would be a real step into the sky. Kale made up his mind and focused on the colorless card of the space gem. Begin drawing. Please maintain a distance of 3 centimeters from the item. You will continue to draw for 3 hours. Starting loading bar. 10799S 10798S. Kale, maintain it at 3 centimeters and extract it for 3 hours. One had to know that the extraction time for a blue-grade item was only 3 seconds within 1 meter. Should I say that it's worthy of being colorless? Kale smiled bitterly. Holding the tesseract in his hand, he sat back on the sun chair and waited patiently. He didn't have a mission, so he could afford to wait. If he guessed correctly, colorless should be the highest quality card, and there was still a huge gap between it and purple. However, perhaps the Infinity Gloves with 6 gems would be of a colorless rare quality. Everything was still too far away. Kale thought uninterestedly as he waited for the card to finish counting down. 3 hours later. 3, 2, 1. Extraction successful. Congratulations on obtaining the space gem. As the card was drawn in his mind, the blue light of the tesseract in Kale's hand suddenly dimmed a lot, as if the inner flame had been taken out of thin air, leaving only the remaining energy of the gems. At the same time in Kale's exclusive card space. The moment the colorless card of the space gem entered, it immediately leaped up unstoppably, like a bright sun hanging at the highest point of the card space, overshadowing the brilliance of tens of thousands of cards in the 6 card areas in the space, declaring its supreme status. The card space should be the safest and most reliable storage place in the world. I'll put the space gem in there first. Kale's thought incarnation looked at the colorless card of the space gem in the card space and quickly withdrew from it. The space gem was not an existence that could exert the corresponding ability just by holding it. Now for him, it was like a child getting an energy weapon. Rashly using it without studying it would often result in trouble. Red Skull had personally demonstrated it to him. Kale's thought had just withdrawn from the card space when he found that the tesseract in his hand had begun to undergo subtle changes after losing the space gem. The most obvious change was that the color of the card information displayed in his eyes quickly changed from colorless to gold. Dropped in grade? Kale was stunned, looking at the tesseract in his hand that still had some blue light and mysterious aura, but was not as good as before. It was the colorless card of the tesseract. After the space gem was taken away, it fell into a brand new gold item card, and even the item name was changed. Tesseract Container? Once a container of the space gem, one of the infinity gems also known as the infinite cube. Gold item card. Remnants of the power of space can temporarily open a space door, but the existence of the space door is unstable and may cause the space to collapse at any time. After use it will continue to be damaged. Current state, unable to draw, remnants of the space gem's power. Kale was silent for a moment and finally shook his head and laughed. Interesting. This was an unexpected gain. Probably no one in the universe would have thought that there was the ability to directly take out the space gem without destroying the external tesseract container. Wait, why do I feel that this could be a trap for the future Thanos? Kyle stroked his smooth chin. The tesseract wasn't damaged in the slightest, and it still contained some residual energy from the space gem. Throwing this empty shell of the tesseract out of his hand could also save a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, Kale could not help but smile. He could already imagine it. In the future, when Thanos painstakingly obtained the magic cube, he crushed it and was about to embed the space gem into the infinity glove, only to find out that there was nothing inside. That eggplant-like face of his would turn ashen. Since he obtained the space gem, it would be the biggest gain of this battle, and Kale was not ready to continue to stay in the Atlantic Ocean. He looked at the vast sea in front of him and sighed. Steve, it seems that we will really have to meet again in more than half a century. In fact, there is no need to worry for you, this may be just a short nap. After you wake up, it will be the peaceful era that you often murmur about. I, who stayed, will be the one who will continue to move forward in this era of war. Kale's eyes became more and more determined, and he let venom cover his body, transforming it into a black combat suit, and summoned the Blue Eagle to return here. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.